from the high desert in the great American Southwest. I bid you all good evening, good morning, good afternoon, in whatever time zone you may reside. All of them covered thoroughly indeed by this program, Coast to Coast AM. I'm Art Bell. It's great to be here, an honor to be with you on the weekend. This night, we will interview somebody that I've been dying to interview for, 4 or 5 months at least. It was about 4 or 5 months ago that a total bombshell of a story broke on the news wires. It was on all the networks. You may remember it said a researcher has discovered that the Y-chromosome, the male chromosome, is deteriorating. It's falling apart. And in another 100,000 years or whatever, there'll be no more of us guys. That's it. We're gone. No more men in the world. That is one researcher's view. His name is Bryan Sykes, and we're going to have him on at in the next hour, 11 o'clock Pacific time. And I've got his book here. It's called Adam's Curse. That's an appropriate name for a book like that. Adam's Curse, huh? It is like a curse. Eventually, you are no more. I think he's down in Australia or somewhere like that. Let's see. I don't know, maybe Great Britain. I don't know. Anyway, he's far away somewhere, and we'll be calling him in the next hour. This hour, we'll have open lines and a few things that I've got that I want to run by you. News-wise, in a daring escape, an American hostage in Iraq, Thomas Hamill, just pried open the doors of the house where he was being held and walked out virtually into the arms of U.S. troops. And, I had seen some video of this guy, Thomas Hamill, and I thought when I saw him, they had a shot, you may have seen it on CNN or something, of him in a car, and I thought, he looks like CIA or Special Forces or something, but they say he was just an American, so, I'm not saying he's CIA, I'm just saying he kind of had that look to him like he was one tough mama of a guy. Anyway, he walked right out, and he's now free. Not a good day in Iraq. There aren't many of those lately at all. Matter of fact, 11 Americans died at the hands of insurgents again. And the numbers are going up at an extremely concerning rate for the administration. And, of course, there was a big hoo-ha over the Nightline business the other night. And now the story about torture. Dia el-Shwahiri spent several stints in Baghdad's notorious prison, twice under Saddam Hussein's rule, once under American. He prefers Saddam's torture to ours, I guess. Says he was stripped naked by American guards. Told the Associated Press all kinds of things were done to him. General Richard Myers said Sunday, on the other hand, there is no evidence of systematic abuse, and the actions of just a handful have unfairly tainted all American forces. Torture. The Egyptians worshipped cats as great intellectual deities. As towers of intellectualism, the Egyptians really did think cats were very smart, very intelligent. And there's only two mammals that torture: humans and cats. You ever thought about that? Have you ever watched a cat with a mouse or anything else? I wonder if it is in our nature. There's a lot working on both sides. They really hate us. The radical Islamics. They want us dead. They certainly proved that, didn't they? And a lot of Americans have a lot of very serious memories about September 11th, so nobody ever endorses torture, you might understand some of the emotions that the American captors may have gone through if there was some of that. Anyway, that's an interesting note and something for you to consider really hard, that only two mammals on Earth really torture, and that would be humans and cats. I'm not sure if that says a lot for us or a lot for cats or less for the two groups. For financially pressed consumers, it's coming down to a choice between spending on gasoline or groceries. What do you think they're choosing? Well, so far gasoline is winning. This is from a food industry analysis. Given the economic environment, it is not surprising that more shoppers are buying food today in discount stores and other low-price venues than ever before, so they're spending their money where? On gasoline. But I guess that'll reach a balance at some point, won't it? We'll be right back. I thought this of possible interest to you. It certainly was me. 2 crashes in a row, can you believe that? That happened last night, first time out of the chute each time. That's very interesting. What do you think would happen if E.T. arrived? Well, there's something actually known about that. Let me read you a little bit of this. It's a wonderful article by Jim Wilson, who I think wrote it for Popular Mechanics. I can't be sure about that. I think, yes, Popular Mechanics, probably the cover story. Within the scientific community, the question is no longer whether extraterrestrial life exists, but if E.T. is smart enough to do long division. Scientists are of two minds regarding the existence of extraterrestrial intelligence. Skeptics acknowledge simple life forms might be found on other planets, but insist intelligent life is unique to Earth. Their belief is based on the assumption that Earth possesses unique physical attributes, including a magnetic field that deflects cosmic rays and a moon that absorbs asteroids. Together, these protective features make Earth a rare, safe harbor, one that nurtured the evolution of primitive life forms into intelligent beings that, well, I won't say it. The opposing camp sees the prospect for discovering alien life in more mathematical terms. Its touchstone, the Drake equation, which links the probability of discovering extraterrestrial intelligence to factors such as the size of the universe, the number of stars with Earth-like planets. With the discovery of each new planet beyond Earth's solar system, there are now more than 100. The odds of encountering intelligence increase. Governments and international organizations about the world have taken notice of the changing odds. No governmental official has gone on record yet claiming that UFOs are real, let alone a threat, yet with little public fanfare. Check this out, folks. They have, in fact, begun preparing for the single most important event in human history, first contact. That is the moment Earthlings discover incontrovertible proof that they are not alone. Unless E.T. materializes from another dimension in the middle of the Super Bowl, humans most likely are going to have some advance warning of arrival. How much time we get to straighten up for extraterrestrial company depends on who spots E.T. first. The privately funded SETI Institute uses radio telescopes owned by observatories around the world to sweep the sky for signals broadcast by advanced civilizations. If E.T. has read Emily Post or her intergalactic equivalent and calls ahead, we could have years or decades or longer to prepare for first contact. Unfortunately, the current SETI Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence project can afford to look only at small swatches of the sky, so any extraterrestrial courtesy calls probably are going to be missed. In fact, a more likely scenario is that the U.S. Air Force would spot ET spacecraft as it traversed the void between Earth and the Moon using powerful radar and optical telescopes in Hawaii, Greenland, Florida, the Indian Ocean. The Air Force Space Command tracks satellites, monitors missile launches, and spots baseball and larger-sized bits of orbiting debris with the hope of preventing any accidents, of course. But in fact, if ET turns up on Space Command's radar, that would mean alien visitors are hours or perhaps even just minutes away. So, what would happen? The broad brush outline for Earth's response to the first alien encounter is set out in an international agreement called the Declaration of Principles Concerning Activities Following the Detection of Extraterrestrial Intelligence. Written by a committee of scientists organized by the SETI Institute, the declaration spells out what astronomers should do and what they should avoid doing immediately after first contact. Perhaps the most surprising, now you listen to me very carefully here, the most surprising aspect of the agreement is that astronomers who sign on to the declaration agree to keep the news of any imminent contact under their hat until the astronomy community and authorities have been notified. Now, how many times have you heard me interviewing Seth Shostak when he has said, "Oh, no, it would get out"? And sure enough, in this article, they actually do cover that aspect that, it might, the publicity might, it might break, somebody might leak it or something. But really, the fact of the matter is, and Seth has never told me this, they sign something that says, "Oh, no," goes first to the other astronomers, then the authorities. Now, authorities would cover a whole lot of ground, wouldn't it? I'm not going to, I obviously have time to read all of this, and you should pick up a copy of Popular Mechanics and read this very long article, but oh my, what would happen if they got here? The question of how humanity might react to its first contact with intelligent aliens was officially raised in the late 1950s by the then newly created National Aeronautics and Space Administration, our lovable NASA. Curious as to how discoveries about the origin of the universe might affect society as a whole, NASA contracted with, of course, the famous Brookings Institute. And I need not cover that because you know what Brookings has pretty much said, how it would upset the apple cart here on Earth and so forth. If ET turns up at NASA's doorstep, bearing an invitation, the one we sent out in a spacecraft, it's in for a bit of a surprise. Instead of getting a handshake from the head of NASA, wouldn't that be nice? It will instead be handcuffed by an FBI agent dressed in a biosafety level 4 suit. Instead of sleeping in the Lincoln bedroom, as you might expect at the White House, why, this alien will be whisked away to the Department of Agriculture's Animal Disease Center on Plum Island off the coast of New York, Long Island, where it will be poked and probed by doctors from the National Institutes of Health. A Department of Energy, or DOE, a nuclear emergency search team, NEST, a NEST team they're called, will tow away its spacecraft like it had parked by a hydrant. Unfriendly as this welcome may seem, it is the chain of events that would most likely follow any visitor's arrival, and there's so much more to this article. So I suggest you pick up a copy of Popular Mechanics. It kind of squashes the concept of the cheering, welcoming crowds, the handshake from, the head of NASA, then the President of the United States and other world leaders, and a cheery event. Oh, no, it's off to Plum Island and Needles. Oh, let's see. Oh, here's something else NASA's up to, maybe. In the First World War, frontline troops who were away from their loved ones for long periods famously had bromide put into their tea, which does roughly the opposite of a lot of what your email suggests those little pills do. In other words, it reduces the distraction of any females around. You just aren't interested. But yesterday it was suggested such measures might be taken a lot further, in fact, all the way to Mars. Dr. Rachel Armstrong, speaking yesterday at a British Interplanetary Society symposium on the on human future in space, said that the U.S. space agency NASA was considering how to deal with the natural urges of astronauts traveling on long journeys, such as a 3-year trip to Mars, where the 6-strong crew would likely be including 2 women. NASA's talking about the chemical sterilization of astronauts on longer journeys. I don't know. NASA was nonplussed by the suggestion yesterday. I haven't heard anything about it, said a spokesman at NASA's Johnson Space Center, where the long-range trips announced by our president in January are now being planned. But the denial may hide a reluctance in a nation like ours, where the showing of a nipple on national television, oh, what that did. There was religious outcry. There was FCC action. I mean, we're not exactly Victorian, but we're not exactly that far away from it either. So NASA doesn't even like to talk about stuff like this. But I guess it could be an issue, right? I mean, you've got several men up there with the right stuff. And women, and they've got a long journey to make. I mean, 18 months possibly? Or even if it got down to 6 months there and 6 months back, that's still a long, long journey. Well, maybe this is our future. Florida. It's Manalapan or something like that, Florida. Associated Press. One of the nation's wealthiest towns is soon going to have cameras and computers running background checks on every single car and driver that passes through. The police chief there, a fellow named Clay Walker, said cameras are going to take infrared photos, recording a car's tag number. Then software will automatically run the numbers through law enforcement databases. A 911 dispatcher is alerted should a car be stolen or is the subject of a be on the lookout for kind of warning. Next to the tag number, police will have a picture of the driver, taken with another set of cameras, upgraded versions of the standard surveillance cameras already in place, but this baby will nail your face. And if there's a robbery, police will be able to comb records to determine who drove through town on any given afternoon or evening. In other words, courts have ruled that in a public area you have no expectation of privacy, said Walker, one of 11 sworn officers who protects that town's 321 residents. Still, Walker says their data will be destroyed every 3 months. The town council authorized $60,000 in security upgrades last week after 3 burglaries this winter robbed residents of $400,000 in jewelry. Oh, it is a rich town. The town averages 2 or 3 burglaries per year, and residents demanded something happen fast, and this is what they're doing. So there's going to be cameras literally everywhere. You would not be able to go through this town without them having a picture of your car, your license plate, and your face. And I remember, just a couple of years ago going to the Super Bowl, and I was the unwitting guinea pig, along with everybody else who went to that Super Bowl, of the nation's first large mass attempt at taking everybody's picture. And they had computers there, and they were looking for felons. Now, nobody, as far as I know, was arrested. Nobody got arrested, actually, because of that. Even if the alarm bells went off and all the rest of it, it was merely an experiment to see if they could reasonably do it. And I think that what we're seeing here in this story is the perfection or the near perfection of this system. So I guess Big Brother is just about here. It's just about Orwell time, folks. When they can point a camera at you in your car and they can know everything about you in a couple of seconds flat, there's nowhere to run. Even though this would be a very large country, I suppose there was a day in America where, by golly, if you had to be on the lam, you could take off. But I think that day is ending. And I think now we can look forward to the probability, the certainty, the vast certainty that George is out there winking at us right now. And that privacy, such as we knew it, is no more. That's right. They're everywhere, and nobody's going to go on the lam. Not if somebody wants to find you. Very, very different America, isn't it? From the high desert in the middle of the night, which is where we do our work and our play, this is Coast to Coast AM. I'm Art Bell. Oh, that's fast service. Look at this. I got a fast blast from Lex, who's the webmaster, Lex Loonhood. Hey, Art, I found that Popular Mechanics article you were reading from and have it posted first under the Hot Stories section, lower right side of the page. That's fast. All right, east of the Rockies, you're on the air. Hi. That didn't work too well. Let me try it again. East of the Rockies. Hello, you're on the air.
This is Bob.
Hello, Bob.
I believe that if your ice age descends on Europe, as you've predicted, that the Mediterranean could become a freshwater lake, Iraq could become the Eden garden, and North Africa could become the breadbasket of the whole portion of that world.
That's how it might work, Bob.
Can you imagine Iraqis having the remaining reservoir of oil and fresh water? They'd be the richest people in the world.
Well, I don't know. We occupy it, so maybe we'd be. I mean,
maybe our people went over there smarter than I think they are.
Maybe, Bob. I've got. I want to say it again. Rush really just went off in a tangent about the movie. The movie. I'm going to tell you a couple things about the movie. It's going to grab you, and it's going to grab you from the first second you sit down, and it's not going to let you go. It's called The Day After Tomorrow. It's coming up. You may have begun to see some trailers for it now. They're running on television and in movie theaters and that sort of thing. It's going to be a big movie. And Rush, took off really hard on it. I mean, he said basically it was an issue nobody cared about. That just isn't true. Of all the things he said, to have said that, it's an issue people don't care about. Our climate or climate change or all the rest of that, but people don't care about it? Oh, my goodness, that's just not true. Anyway, this movie is going to be quite something, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to grab you really, really hard. Roland Emmerich's done a lot of work, and it's going to be something. It's called The Day After Tomorrow, coming up May 28th, nationwide. It's from our book. I say our book, Whitley Strieber, myself, Art Bell. It's called The Coming Global Superstorm, and The Day After Tomorrow is based in part on that book. And for those of you that have read both, you will see both books, or that book, of course, throughout the movie. And I warn you, it's one of those movies that is going to leave you absolutely breathless. West of the Rockies, you're on the air. Hello.
Yeah, hi, Art.
Hi.
How you doing tonight?
I'm just spiffy, thank you.
Good to talk to you. I'm Dennis. I'm in Phoenix.
Hey, Dennis.
What I called about is kind of related to that, except it has to do with catastrophic Earth changes. By the way, I'm looking forward to the movie. I'm rereading Coming Global Superstorm.
Mm-hmm.
But this evening I was watching part of, this was on cable, it's called 10.5 or 10.5.
Oh, yes. Now, be careful what you tell me here, because I have it on hard drive. I detest having to wait. And so instead I put on hard drive tonight and will tomorrow night and then watch it all together.
Oh, what I have to say won't ruin anything for you.
Okay.
Who is it that he's been a regular guest? The geologist from California who has learned to predict quakes, and he was actually even suspended.
He was the county geologist, right, for up in the Bay Area. It'll hit me anyway. I know who you're talking about. Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, The movie kind of has to do with some kind of visionary or far-sighted geologist there in California who they pretty much get treated the same way. They must have been, whoever wrote that must have been paying attention to your program or him, because those with the foresight pretty much get treated the same way, same reaction.
Yes.
And
yes, well, messengers are always shot.
Oh, and the politics and all that stuff, yeah.
They're always shot. Messengers are always shot. If it's bad news, people don't want to hear bad news. That's all there is. Well, it's a funny thing. Actually, in a way they do, and in a way they don't. It's kind of like going to a horror movie. You know, why do you go to a horror movie? It's going to scare you. You know it's going to scare you, but you want that a little.
The thing is to have to live through it, and I strongly believe, I have my reasons, I won't get into them, but and I was talking to somebody from California today who's moved here, and actually I don't think Phoenix is a safe place. I've got my reasons for that. I won't belabor this conversation, but he said, you know, we're due for a cleaning, and the human race, or at least this country. And I says, well, you know, if the populace doesn't do it, I suspect actually Mother Nature will do it before the populace does.
Well, here's the thing about Mother Nature. Mother Nature, kind of like with justice, is you could think of her, you know, holding a couple of weights, right? And he's right about that. Mother Nature doesn't get angry. Mother Nature doesn't get mad. Mother Nature gets even. This is sort of a way to think about it. In other words, if something becomes too far out of balance, then inevitably there's something in nature that will act to correct that balance. Simple as that. A wildcard line, you're on the air. Hello.
Good evening, Art.
Good evening to you.
Well, this is Pat. I'm calling you from Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And, Art, do you know how the conventional wisdom is that if extraterrestrial life were proven to absolutely exist, that the Christian community would be shaken the most?
No, actually, that's not conventional wisdom if you're drawing from what Brookings said. They suggested that, as unlikely as it might seem, the greatest disturbance would come to science.
To the scientific community.
Yes, indeed.
But I just wanted to relate something that I heard several years ago. I was listening to an interview on public television with the Reverend Billy Graham.
Ah, yes.
And in the middle of the interview, out of the blue, he makes a reference to the inhabitants of other planets. And the interviewer now picks him up on this. And, Art, I was astonished to hear Dr. Graham say that he believes absolutely that extraterrestrials are real and that there are many inhabited planets in our universe.
That is very interesting. I wasn't aware he had said that, but that's fascinating. Fascinating. And what was his general consensus?
If I can remember the context correctly, Art.
They're all God's creatures?
Yes, and that they might be human and some might not.
Mm-hmm.
But in any event, he believes that they exist and he spoke it as an absolute, not as a theory.
Mm-hmm. Fascinating. I would love to read a transcript of what the Reverend Graham said. I really would. I'd love to read that. Somebody out there inevitably will have it. And by the way, if you want to get something to me, it's not that hard. I am reachable. And I will give you a little hint. Because anybody who gets as many emails, and my emails number in the thousands, many days, into the thousands, try and put something in the header that will suggest to me what it's about and how urgent it really is. Because I do a kind of, when you get thousands of emails, it's kind of a system of triage. And without a header that would attract, then I'm liable to skip over it and regard it as, another little blue pill advertisement. So try and put something in there. You can reach me, Art Bell, at mindspring.com. That's ARTBELL at mindspring.com or artbell at AOL.com. Either one of those will get to me. First time caller line, you're on the air. Hello.
Hi, this is Fred calling from Portland, listening to you on WGAN.
Yes, sir.
I was just actually calling about, you had a few guests on there before talking about the speed of gravity.
Oh, yes.
And some that thought it was instantaneous, and other ones had other speculation about it.
Yes.
And I was actually just calling to say they did a study on that not too long ago involving Jupiter and quasars and things along that line.
Mm-hmm.
And the scientists were actually able to determine that it works at the speed of light.
They were.
Yes. There are several studies. If you go to google.com, it says the exact thing that they did.
That's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. At the speed of light, confirming again, then I suppose that nothing can exceed the speed of light. Or at least supporting that, huh?
Yes. They said if the sun were to immediately just disappear, we'd still follow a trajectory for about 8.3 minutes, at which point we'd fly off at the tangent. There were some studies on it, and they had all the exact information, but...
So we'd have a real hot 8 minutes.
Yes.
So to speak. All right, well, I appreciate the information, and I'll do a little bit of research on it.
All right, have a good night.
You too, the speed of gravity. Some guests thought it to be instantaneous, and I thought, well, then, how would you ever prove that it was not so? Because all matter is presently in existence, and to measure the speed of gravity, which relates to the mass of an object, you would have to create a new mass and then measure its effect from point A to point B, right? So I still have questions. Wildcard line, you're on the air. Hello.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
Hi, Art.
Hello.
Hello. Are we on the air now?
What's your best guess?
Okay. Yeah, a few weeks ago, you had a conversation with Sir Charles.
Oh, yes.
Regarding the use of satellites to project microwave energy to the Earth.
Yes, sir.
For
energy, yes.
Right. Well, I was thinking that system might be used to power up or to work to help to power up a space plane, as it were. If you had two satellites bracketing the plane on its line of flight upwards, and you had the receiver dishes on port and starboard side in the fuselage. Mm-hmm. You know the SRBs from the...
In other words, you're suggesting that a satellite collecting energy, instead of beaming it... slow down. Instead of beaming it back toward Earth, could project it in a beam to a spacecraft that would then accelerate away from Earth, continuing to use this energy to build its acceleration.
Right, exactly.
Gotcha.
The SRBs from the shuttle, the solid rocket boosters,
right?
They burn powdered aluminum, and the method of their ignition is like an arc welding type mechanism.
Yes.
So I was reasoning that perhaps, the more voltage you had at hand, the less powdered aluminum you would burn, and consequently the greater distance you could cover.
Well, that's fascinating. I appreciate the call, and I wonder if we might not look into that a little bit. I wonder if NASA's looked into it. It's really an intriguing idea. He was talking first of the concept of beaming energy back to Earth, collecting it with large solar collectors in some sort of a fixed orbit, and then beaming them back to Earth, with collectors on the ground. Instead, he is suggesting this as a means of propulsion, virtually of propulsion, of pushing a craft away from Earth. An intriguing idea, and perhaps a way with enough energy to accelerate to very great speeds. East of the Rockies, you're on the air. Hi.
Hello, Art.
Hello.
This is Experiment 626 again. How you doing?
Why would you call yourself an experiment?
Well, like when I talked to you the last time with John Lear on the phone about, how we're all experimenting, we're just vessels. And
yes.
Yeah, so anyway, did you see the latest headlines about the robots that they want to build to send to the moon and to fix the space shuttle or the space...
the telescope?
Yeah.
The Hubble? Yes. Oh, yes, I did see that.
They used the ginger, Segway?
Yes.
The bottom of the Segway for the part of the robot.
Really?
Yeah, they got it showing a picture of it here, and it looks like, they call it Robonaut.
Robonaut, that's pretty good.
Yeah, it looks pretty cool. It looks like a robot with with a base like the Segway.
Well, they've got a lot of work to do with robots to get them really where we expect. Robots by now, we're supposed to be doing everything for us, the dishes, everything, and it just hasn't happened. It's very disappointing.
Just like you, I've been waiting for that, and we said, wait a minute, weren't we promised that back in 2000?
We sure were. Well, we were promised that back in the 50s.
Yeah, of course. You grew up in the same era I did. So I was like, come on, I want my jetpack, I want my flying car, and I want my robot.
You got it. That's right. Where are the flying cars?
Exactly. I'm going like, come on, this is supposed to be Back to the Future time already.
Extremely disappointing.
Well, you have a good night, Art.
You too, sir. Take care. West of the Rockies, you're on the air. Hello.
Hello, this is Olin in Culver City, California.
Yes, Olin.
Yes, the reason that Red China is underselling everybody since 1995 is because Red China is giving away 8.27 yuan per dollar when the dollar is only worth about 5 yuans. Red China is using slave labor to build up their military-industrial complex.
You mean kind of like we did?
Well, but they're in continuing violation of the GATT treaty, which says...
Well, you know what, though? I think a lot of nations in their infancy have used what amounts to slave labor, one way or the other. You can think of it that way.
Oh, I see.
Well, don't you think? I mean, really, America did some of that. We did have slavery, didn't we?
Well, yes.
And then that slavery built a lot of early America, didn't it?
Well, they also had indentured servants from Great Britain and Europe. So
yeah, I'm just saying it kind of it's one of those evolutionary things that it's not laudable, but it seems to be just almost universally true.
Well, selling low to get started is a good practice, but unfortunately we are under fascist economic attack to deindustrialize America and bankrupt the American government.
Yeah, that was last night's guest, and he makes a point that we're pretty much on the way toward that now, huh?
Well, that's right. When Red China sells out the treasury bonds and notes that they're holding, they'll bankrupt the American government. As a matter of fact, Red China is dumping cheap foreign goods made by slave labor in concentration camps all over the world, dropping their goods all over the world.
Yeah, I know.
So,
I don't know exactly what to do about it. I mean, jobs are being outsourced. You know, a lot of times when you call for tech support or something these days, it's incredible. It's like you'll get some guy and you'll notice an accent, and you know, maybe halfway through the conversation that you're straining to have, you'll say, "Hey, where are you?" "Oh, Bangladesh."
Yeah, well, I think
Pakistan, India.
Yeah,
I mean, it's amazing what's going on.
Well, the problem here is that we're being deindustrialized by a fascist dictatorship with slave labor. And when they lower the boom by dropping that 8.27 yuans per dollar and let the yuan float, which they're supposed to do according to the GATT treaty, why then the value of the dollar will drop and the prices of all our goods and services will go up because things won't be that cheap anymore.
Yeah, you're right. It's going to be a rough ride. We have a tough economic ride ahead of us. And if you listen carefully, again, you know, messengers are shot, at least metaphorically. I mean, last night's guest kind of painted a fairly dismal picture of our current economic situation with regard to our place in the world right now and what's going on around us. Fairly dismal. And speaking of dismal pictures, just wait till you hear what's coming up next. Dr. Bryan Sykes, who's one of the world's, and I really mean this, the world's foremost geneticists, is going to be with us. And he contends that it's later than you think, guys. Well, actually, it's later than you think for guys. In other words, eventually there will be no more men. That's it. We're done. The Y-chromosome is crumbling. And that's what makes men. From the high deserts, stay right where you are, because we'll be right back. Professor Sykes, it is an honor to have you on the program.
Well, it's a great pleasure for me to be on it, Art.
Peace long.
Well, I'm over here in America because the U.S. edition of Adam's Curse just published last week, so that's the fortunate reason that you're able to call me really just down the road rather than across the Atlantic and Pacific or wherever it was.
I see. Wonderful. I have a copy of the hardback book here. It is a beautiful book, by the way. Very well done.
It's a nice color, isn't it?
It is indeed. And so you should be very proud of it. And is this the first book of this magnitude that you have published?
I did. I wrote another book a couple of years ago called The Seven Daughters of Eve, and you can see there's a connection between the two. That one being mostly about the history of women, or at least what DNA tells us about the history of women, whereas this one, Adam's Curse, as well as being about the extinction of men, is about what my research has discovered about the history of men.
Well, I'm sure we'll somehow get to all of that.
Well, I'm sure we will. We've got plenty of time.
We sure do. That's the beauty of radio. It really is. Long-form radio. There's nothing in the world like it. It is a shocking claim, that human males... Are you sure when they talk to you about publishing and perishing, you didn't interpret it to mean publish about perish? No, huh?
It is a long time in the future.
Well, how long?
Well, if we start talking about that, we're going to be talking about the end of the book before we go through all the arguments in
Okay, all right. So
we'll get to it. I'm sure we'll get to it before the program finishes. But I think it's a process which, for reasons we'll have loads of time to go into, is inevitable. But the time scale, whenever you say something will happen, and you're going to be asked, well, when? So I've made various assumptions and come up with a figure about 5,000 generations from now, which is around about 100, 125,000, maybe 150,000 years, something like that.
Mm-hmm. How is this going to happen, Professor, and through what means were you able to discern this?
Well, why don't we talk about the rest of the book, and we'll come to that, because it really is at the end of it.
Oh, all right.
Because if I answer that question straight away, it would take me about 20 minutes to get through the.
No, that's just fine. So then, why don't we ask you instead? Then you're saying that basically we're only genetically modified women anyway. What do you mean by that?
Yep. Well, I think that there's not actually all that much dispute about that. I mean, the sort of motive for writing Adam's Curse was because I wanted to try and sort of bring out the genetic reasons behind and the consequences of the fact that something that's perfectly blindingly obvious to everybody, and it actually affects us every single day, which is that our species, unlike every species actually, is divided into males and females. And, we could talk an entire program about the repercussions of that in our everyday sort of social encounters.
Professor, is the ratio roughly exactly 50-50?
Not quite, actually. At birth, there's slightly more males born, but they're always rather a bit weaker. And they don't live as long, of course. Men die before women. And I think there's a genetic reason underlying that. So let me just start off with this genetically modified women business. Well, it is the case that there's a little chromosome which men have and women don't have. Mm-hmm. And on that chromosome is one particular gene. And what it does is it flips a genetic switch when we're, us boys, when we were only 6 weeks after fertilization. So very soon after we were conceived, this switch flicks and it ignites a whole relay of genetic reactions which take us away from what we otherwise would have become, which is girls. And it takes us away from that, and bit by bit turns us into boys.
Really?
Yep.
And is it a matter of chance with regard to that switch? Is it, in other words, could it as easily not be thrown as thrown?
well, it's usually thrown if people have a Y chromosome, if fetuses, have a Y chromosome, they almost always end up as males. But occasionally, and this is how we know about how this works, occasionally there's something wrong with this switch, and it doesn't get thrown.
And then?
In that case, the natural course of events continues, and those children, those babies, are born female, even though they've actually got a Y chromosome. So that's how we know that the Y chromosome is right at the heart of the matter, and that if it's not working, then the natural progression, it's not that if the Y chromosome isn't working, the fetus dies, or the embryo dies. It doesn't. It just carries on and becomes female.
Fully, functionally normal female. Is that true?
Pretty much, but for a complicated chromosomal reason, they're usually sterile. But often very beautiful, as a matter of fact. So these are XY females, and there's a number of them actually made a career in modeling, believe it or not.
How rare are they, Professor? How rare are they?
There's about one in, between 1 in 5 and 1 in 10,000 births, something like that. So, not exceptionally rare.
Really?
Yeah.
Certainly more common than in fact, you're telling me something new altogether. Well, then this might be the right place for Arlene's question. She sent one in by email before you got here, and I thought it was pretty good. She asks, my theory is, maybe as the Y chromosome deteriorates, so do the actual resultant transitory human individuals. Therefore, we begin to see increasing numbers of homosexuals. Is it possible that homosexuality is merely an expression of the Y chromosome being in an in-between stage?
Well, it's a very good question. And there's a chapter in Adam's Curse about homosexuality, but I think it's a bit more subtle than that, actually. That although the Y chromosome is deteriorating slowly, and we can go into how slowly and what the reasons for that are, I'm not myself convinced that it's that which is the cause of at least male homosexuality. Now, I don't really know whether homosexuality is increasing or decreasing, but when I've talked about Adam's Curse, I've had many people say, well, in my experience, in my neighbourhood, then male homosexuality is increasing. But I can't say that it's due, in response to Arlene's question, that it's clearly due to some changes in the Y chromosome. But we may get on to at some time what I think may be behind or maybe a cause of male homosexuality, but it's a very subtle one.
Okay. But you don't necessarily see a connection, is what you're saying?
I don't necessarily see a connection between the Y chromosome and male homosexuality, but as I'm sure we'll get on to, the Y chromosome is actually involved in a very bitter genetic war with the Y chromosome being transmitted from father to son is if you like, a sort of proxy for the history and the history of the male sex. And certainly because it can only go from one generation to the next through the male sex and not through the female sex, because it's transmitted from father to son.
Yeah.
It's completely opposed to another gene called mitochondrial DNA, which I wrote about in my first book, The Seven Daughters of Eve, which is passed from down the female line. So here you have two, if you like, warring genes that will never make peace.
You actually described a Y chromosome as a genetic ruin, a wasteland littered with molecular wreckage, a graveyard of rotting genes. Oh gosh, that sounds terrible. Is that really?
It does.
Yes. Is that a fair description?
Well, I mean, now we're able to look at detail in what the Y chromosome looks like. It certainly is in a bit of a mess, and it used to, years ago, millions of years ago, in our mammalian ancestors, the Y chromosome started off as an X chromosome, almost certainly, with thousands of different genes on it, and over a period of millions of years, lost most of those genes, only has 27 left now. And in between those genes, which are...
Oh, we're starting to pick up a little hum. Can you hear it there on the telephone?
I can, yes.
Yeah.
It's not coming from mine as far as I can...
You might just move that phone around or the wire around a little bit and see if it comes and goes.
Gone now at the moment.
Anyway, the Y chromosome is under constant attack, you said, virtually at war, and I guess the presumption is it is over time going to lose the war.
It will lose the war, yes. It'll lose the war because it is deteriorating, and mutations are accumulating at quite a fast rate, and it is a common cause, these mutations on the Y chromosome, a common cause of male infertility these days. And the calculations, the estimates, if you like, of how long I think that the Y chromosome has left is based on what we see now as the mutations in that chromosome that are causing male infertility.
Professor, if it's 100 or 125,000 years out, whatever that number turns out to be, there's going to be a time between now and then where there are increasing numbers of
infertile men.
Really?
Yeah.
I heard some sort of startling statistics about that not very long ago. It's already starting to happen now, isn't it?
Sure. I mean, it is. I mean, 7% of men are not completely infertile, but they're subfertile. So that's a very high percentage.
Did you say 7%?
7%.
7%, all right.
7% of men. And of those, between 1 and 2%, that's not of the 7%, but between 1 and 2% of men are, their infertility, or subfertility, if you like, is caused by mutations on the Y chromosome. So that's very, very high. And because clearly their fathers could not have been infertile, these must be new mutations that are happening, or many of them, new mutations that are happening in these men themselves. So it's very startling.
Well, that is startling. And is it going to be a linear deterioration, or will the process at some point go through a sudden acceleration, or between now and 100 or 125,000 years is going to be linear, more and more and more infertile men?
Yes, I think so. I think it will. If Y chromosomes are completely rendered completely infertile by mutation, then they won't get further because they clearly won't have any sons. But there are mutations which reduce fertility, and those are the ones that will get through to the next generation, but will produce males that are less fertile than their fathers, and that's the accumulated effect, which I believe will mean that in that sort of time frame that we've been talking about, that fertility will decrease to a level of about 1% of what it is now, and when that point is reached, I'd call that a day for the Y chromosome.
Those are going to be a very popular 1%, aren't they? And there's going to be a lot of time.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. They're going to be, there's going to be men around, but they're going to be very infertile.
I'm just trying to find some little bright side to this somewhere.
I know. It's not necessarily. I mean, there are things we can do about it, I think. But this is a process that this is one of the features of the Y chromosome, which, I mean, in the book, which is, we are really talking about the end of the book now. rather than the rest of it. But in the book, because my main research has been looking at what the Y chromosome can tell us about the history, our own human history and the history of men, it's clear from my research and those other people that some Y chromosomes have done remarkably well, and those are Y chromosomes that have been associated with extremely unsavory historical figures a lot.
Really?
Oh, yeah. So the most extreme example, which I've come across, work done by some other Oxford scientists, was to track down the Y chromosome of Genghis Khan, the Mongol emperor.
Of course.
Now, Genghis Khan lived in the 12th century, and work in Central Asia has shown that 16 million men are his direct descendants, so they have his Y chromosome.
And a great big, bold, capital Y, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. Professor, hold on. We're already at the bottom of the hour, and so we'll take a bit of a break here. Genghis Khan, I suppose, huh? And then even the bad guys, the Hitlers of the world, the ruthless dictators of the world, great big capital Ys. You're going to learn a lot tonight, so am I, I'm sure. Professor Bryan Sykes, author of a brand new book that you're going to want to check out. It's called Adam's Curse. From the high desert, middle of the night, I'm Art Bell. I believe we were last talking about Genghis Khan and so forth, and they've got the big capital Ys. I guess that would apply to the Hitlers and the big bad, rough, ruthless dictators in the world and generally violent people. Am I on the right track there?
Well, what distinguishes, let me ask you a question, what distinguishes all those types of people?
Testosterone, I guess.
They're all men, aren't they?
Testosterone, yeah.
They're all men. And in Adam's Curse, I developed the idea that, well, not necessarily causing it, the Y chromosome really, of these men, really benefits from their bad behavior. So it's a sort of moot point about which is driving which. Was Genghis Khan driving his Y chromosome to great success, or look at it the other way, was it Genghis Khan's Y chromosome that was actually driving him to do the things he did? And what did he do? Well, he started the largest land empire ever known, the Mongol Empire.
Mm-hmm.
He invaded adjoining countries. He invaded. He had a fantastic army. Mm. He killed all the men, and he brought the women along, or had them brought along, and he inseminated all the women one by one. Mm. And that's how his Y chromosome spread.
Mm-hmm. That's why he has produced so many capital Ys as descendants.
Right.
That's very interesting.
And I think it's a obvious tendency of people, especially in times gone by, maybe, or in different parts of the world now, men who have a lot of power and wealth and status, not all of them, but more than most men, do tend, when they can, to accumulate large numbers of women. And there's fantastic numbers of tens of thousands of concubines, for example, that were kept for the exclusive use of some well-attested historical despots or emperors. So the two things are very much interlinked.
But there would be another side to that, Professor, wouldn't there? And that would be that some of the greatest achievements were testosterone-driven as well. I mean, some of mankind's greatest achievements, indeed.
Well, that's right. That's right. So you're absolutely right. So the fact that we exist as two sexes, male and female, has driven our evolution, particularly, I think, in the last 10,000 years, and we may go into the reason why it's in the last 10,000 years. And it has driven very many aspects of our evolution. And that works by a type of evolution. It's not natural selection, which is the one that Darwin is best known for, but another of his theories, which is sexual selection. And it's not usually been appreciated that sexual selection is going on in our own species, but well known in others. So perhaps the most familiar example is the peacock's tail. Male peacocks have a huge and elaborate tail, very colourful, to us, very beautiful. And the peahens, the female peacocks, are, by comparison, dull and well camouflaged. Now, what's driven the male peacock to become like that? It's been a slow evolution of male peacocks growing a tail, then one will have a slightly better tail and will attract more mates, and therefore his genes will pass on preferentially to the next generation. And then the tail gets bigger and bigger, but it's also driven not just by men growing bigger, by male peacocks growing bigger tails, but by the male peacocks, their evolution, the evolution of their tail being driven by the choice of the peahens, because they must be able to appreciate these tails for that evolution to occur. So it's a cycle of sexual selection, and it can happen and transform a species very, very quickly.
Well, that is a sort of natural selection, though, isn't it?
It's natural, yes, but Darwin was careful to distinguish the two. It's certainly natural, but it's not as if, our evolution, the reason I'm talking about the peacock is because I see parallels there between what's happened in the peacock and the evolution of our own species over the last 10,000 years, which has been extraordinarily rapid, hugely rapid. I mean, we don't appreciate that necessarily because we live in, we're actually in this modern world, but it's been extremely fast.
Quite right.
And why is that? Well, the idea that I advance in Adam's curse is that men use wealth and power and status in the same way that peacocks use their tails.
Well said,
evolved
yes.
in the parallel fashion. And why didn't they evolve before? It's because there were no such things as wealth and property and ownership before the invention of agriculture. Agriculture comes along, then land becomes owned, flocks of domestic animals become owned, wealth begins to accumulate. Prior to that, we were really struggling to make a living anywhere, just wandering around as hunter-gatherers by and large in small bands. We didn't have any property, we didn't have anything to own, so we couldn't, that couldn't be factored into the ever-present possibilities for sexual selection.
Well, why then, given the state of the world today, aren't the Donald Trumps of the world just putting lots of capital Y's out there?
Well, they probably are.
Well,
they probably are.
Then
they
why?
certainly have been. They certainly have been in the past, and that's how, because my research team has been looking at Y-chromosomes distributed throughout the world, and we see very clearly particular Y-chromosomes that have done really extraordinarily well, and they're, by and large, well, always so far, linked back to historical figures who have not necessarily been as cruel and unpleasant as Genghis Khan, but certainly associated very strongly with wealth and power. And the best examples, I suppose, of those are the chiefs of Scottish clans, where we've done some work and linked back. For example, amongst the MacDonalds, 20% of people called MacDonald are related directly to the founder of the clan, again living about the same time as Genghis Khan.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, and those chromosomes, those Y chromosomes, they're probably getting on for 400,000, 500,000 of these Y chromosomes. A lot of them, of course, in the United States and Canada, having come from this one man. So over the course of 700, 800 years, they've increased in frequency from 1 in the original man to getting on for 500,000, and that's an incredible increase in any kind of evolutionary sense.
Well, then what's going wrong? I guess what's going wrong here? The Ys, it seems like, should be prolific, and to some degree you can look at the real capital Ys out there, and they certainly seem to be doing their very best to proliferate.
Well, that's the irony, because they clearly they have a story to tell about great proliferations, great wealth, great power of these historical figures, the Scottish clan chiefs, Genghis Khan, and many other minor examples. And the irony is that the Y chromosome, which indirectly causes this evolution of this kind of behavior and the desire to accumulate wealth and property to, if you like, to parallel the peacock's tail, that actually the Y chromosome, which is what tells me as a geneticist about this, is itself far from being anything like. It's not macho. It's not. It's not all conquering. It's actually extremely fragile and extremely weak, and that's the irony.
That is an irony, isn't it? So weak and getting weaker, and you're suggesting it's under a constant assault, and so then what we're going to see infertility. Will it have any other measurable genetic effects on offspring as time goes on?
That's big enough, isn't it?
Well, it is.
Yes,
of course.
Let me tell you. Let me say something about why this is. Not why. The reason, not to confuse the terminology. The reason that the Y chromosome is so particularly fragile. Well, there are two reasons. The first is that unlike all our other chromosomes, and we have 23 other chromosomes in our bodies, unlike all of those, it doesn't actually exchange DNA with other chromosomes at each generation. And that's something that all the other chromosomes do. And the process of exchanging DNA, swapping it around, actually heals mutations. So the Y chromosome can't heal its mutations anywhere near as effectively as the other chromosomes. And also, it actually mutates at a faster rate than the other chromosomes for an interesting but actually logical reason, and that's the following. That because the Y chromosome is passed from father to son, it's passed, of course, through sperm. And the Y chromosome, so your Y chromosome, will pass it, as you've got it from your father, who got it from his father and from his father, always in sperm. And therefore, it spends its entire life from generation to generation, over dozens, hundreds of generations, always in the germline of males. That's to say, the cells that are going to produce sperm. And those are a very unhealthy place for DNA to be, because mutations happen when cells divide, and cells divide at a very, very fast rate in the testes in order so that men can produce 100 million sperm a day or something like that. And it's an incredible fact that the DNA in a man of 60 has already been copied 1,000 times. And so the Y chromosome in a man of 60 has been copied 1,000 times. And although the other chromosomes have also been copied, over time they actually spend, this bit hard to go across, but they actually spend half their time not in the cells that produce sperm, but in the cells that produce eggs, because they sort of swap around from males to females as the generations pass.
So you're saying in a man of 60 years of age, it's like his Y has been copied on a bad copy machine 1,000 times?
It's a pretty good copying machine, actually, but yes, 1,000 times. So that's, of course, not all men are 60 when they reproduce, but you can see that over 1,000 generations, let's say, then that's 1 million times it's been copied, and without the ability to repair those mutations, clearly it's an unstable system that will degenerate, and it is.
Yeah, isn't that an evolutionary outrage, Professor? I mean, why would design be such? It would be, it's like a motor company designing a car to fall apart in 20 years.
Well, now, what we're onto there is an interesting thing, that actually evolution, though it seems to us to have design, doesn't have design at all. It has no plans for the future.
Uh-oh.
It has no plans for the future. It's been, without getting into the arguments of evolution by natural selection versus creationism, which we could spend the entire program talking about.
No doubt.
Without getting into that argument, it's always been very difficult for evolutionary biologists to understand what is going on with evolution. And it doesn't seem that it's sufficient to say, it's certainly not the case that there's any kind of design element. All that happens is that things change with time, and particularly good traits or things tend to increase, because rather like the peacock's tail example, they get passed on preferentially to the next generation.
Yes, I've got that, but not in the case of the Y-chromosome.
No, exactly so. But there's nothing that nature can do to help, really. It's just unfortunate that our ancient ancestors, when in the ancestors of the mammals, very early mammals, decided, well, they didn't decide, it just happened, that the way of, if you like, producing males and females was put down to a chromosome, because in lots of other animals it's not done by chromosomes at all. Mm-hmm. We're covering a lot of ground here, but for example, in your American alligators, the sex of the offspring there is not decided by a chromosome, it's decided instead by the temperature at which the egg is incubated. So, but once in the early mammals cases, a chromosome had been given that job of deciding whether an embryo would develop into a male or a female, that chromosome was doomed to the gradual decay that we've been talking about.
But one imagines evolution, Professor, to be, by its very nature, a very efficient process.
Well, it's efficient by killing off or not letting survive anything that doesn't really work. And so it appears to be efficient because what's left, what survives, is still going. But and logically, if we accept that the Y chromosome is gradually deteriorating.
Well, I don't know if I can accept that.
Okay.
We're slowly turning into an appendix.
Sort of, yes, sort of. But it does have this. It does have an extremely high mutation rate, and it's not just going to affect us. Of course, it'll affect other mammals. It's just in the long term, the very long term, a really, really bad way of trying to determine whether embryos turn out into males or females. And it might well see the end of mammals altogether, but that's, hundreds of millions of years into the future. There's a design flaw in the way we and other mammals decide sex.
Well, perhaps only we see it as a flaw, and evolution sees it just as the way it happens.
Well, it's done reasonably well for over the past hundreds of millions of years. And incidentally, there's a little-known theory going around. The mammals were getting nowhere while the dinosaurs were around.
Right.
Only when the dinosaurs died out did they really start to make their mark.
Yes.
And dinosaurs may have, we don't know this, but if they're anything like the alligator or the turtle, they may too have relied on the temperature at which their eggs were incubated to decide whether they were going to be turn out to be males or females.
Mm-hmm.
And so, let's say, for example, that if the dinosaur eggs were incubated at a high temperature, they turn out to be females, and at a low temperature, they turn out to be males. Now, I think most people believe that the dinosaurs were finished off by a meteorite that lowered the temperature of the Earth.
Professor, we're going to have, that's a good place actually to hang people up.
Carry on with that.
Good. Stay right there, and we'll be right back. We have one of the world's greatest geneticists with us tonight, Professor Bryan Sykes, who's written a brand new book. You're going to want to read this one. It's called Adam's Curse. So the evolutionary future unfolding may not include men eventually. Anyway, we were discussing dinosaurs, I believe, and you said man really didn't take off until the dinosaurs did.
That's right, yeah. The mammals really didn't take off, but nobody's quite sure why the dinosaurs died out. But here's an idea. Alligators and turtles, they both don't rely on chromosomes to decide which is going to be a male and female. The eggs decide on the basis of how cool or warm the eggs are when they're being incubated.
Right.
So, let's take a turtle for example. If the eggs are incubated at 34 degrees centigrade Celsius, they all hatch as females. If they're all incubated at 26 degrees, they all hatch as males. So usually they're kind of in between. Some hatch as males, some as females. Now, if the dinosaurs used the same system, of course, and suddenly the temperature of the Earth went down dramatically by a few degrees, as a lot of people think when this meteor hit 65 million years ago, blanketing the Earth in dust and reducing the temperature, almost like a nuclear winter, really. Then the dinosaurs and any other creatures that used temperature of eggs to determine sex would have ended up, in the case if they had that sort of hot female, cool male system, all the dinosaurs would have been male. And of course they'd have gone overnight.
That'd be the end of, yeah.
Yeah. So if that were the case, and it's not proven or even much thought about actually, but it would be one way that what had up to then been an extremely good way of deciding sex and evolutionarily, perfectly in tune and had lasted for many hundreds of millions of years, they'd have gone overnight.
Professor, wouldn't that mean that as perhaps an asteroid or whatever could have accomplished that, perhaps even a rapid cyclical climate change would have done the same thing, huh?
Well, it would have to be pretty rapid, really.
Yeah.
But, an asteroid or a large meteor impact, which is thought by many, and there's evidence of this to have happened, reduce the temperature. Any organism or any animal that depends on temperature to decide sex would have the sex ratios, the ratios between males and females, drastically altered.
But there are those troublesome woolly mammoths with the frozen greenery in their mouths.
Oh, those, that's right. But although that's right, I think they died for other reasons. They were regular mammals, no doubt about that. All right, the point I was trying to get at is that the way in which sex is decided is not necessarily going to save a species or save a whole order of animals. And I think in the case of the mammals, relying as we have on chromosomes, and by once we've done that, the chromosome that decides sex is doomed to ultimate decay. Well, nothing's going to help.
Nothing will help.
Well, the only thing that's going to help is if we, now realizing this danger, could actually do something about it.
Manipulate. Mike in Utah says not all genetic mutations are bad. It seems like many could actually improve the viability of the Y-chromosome. How do you take that into account?
He's quite right. Not all mutations are bad, but you probably find that some mutations on Y chromosomes have helped to boost fertility. But most mutations are damaging, and it would, and I think the number of bad mutations, for the reasons that the Y chromosome is always restrained to the testes of germline cells of men, will eventually overtake the occasional good mutation that results because of that.
So this battle is ongoing. The deterioration is ongoing, and you suggest it will be a linear deterioration until finally the end, out at 100, 125,000 years, whatever.
Well, that's if the world lasts that long, of course.
Yeah, not such a good bet to take.
No, quite right. And that, and I developed the theme that is the other side of Adam's curse. That if you like, the peacock's tail equivalent in our own species is the accumulation of wealth and power and property and so on. And the thing about the peacock's tail is that it can only grow so large. If peacocks would love to have tails 100 feet long, but of course if they did, they couldn't even fly, so a leopard wandering along would soon finish them off. But with our sort of social equivalent of the peacock's tail, wealth and power, property, status, and those sorts of things, there is no limit to the amount that individuals can accumulate, those in the same way that there is to the size of the peacock's tail. So the only limit really is the ability of our planet to sustain the production of sufficient wealth and power and status and those kinds of things. So in that sense, whether the Earth lasts for 100,000 years to witness the eventual extinction of men through the Y chromosome, if it doesn't last that long, it's because of the Y chromosome's other effect. So Adam's curse, in that sense, is a double whammy, a double blow.
Yes. I suppose somebody with a great big colorful tail might one day push the wrong button, and then we wouldn't make our 100,000 years anyway.
No, we would not.
Well, so let's for a second jump back, because it's such a big question in society. I don't know, perhaps in your research you have made some determination about homosexuality, and so many numbers are tossed about. Is male, homosexuality, period, is it on the increase? Do you have any statistics that would tell us whether it's actually increasing, or has it been static for as long as we know?
Well, Art, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I'm not an expert on homosexuality. I have a chapter in the book on Adam's Curse about it, but as to knowing the statistics which you asked me about, I won't say anything because I really don't know much about it, and it's best to say that straight out, really. Clearly, homosexuality, the reason I was interested in writing about it was the following. About 10 years ago, there were, a little over 10 years ago, there was a couple of scientific papers which said that they had found a gay gene. I don't know if you remember that.
I vaguely do, yes.
And it didn't really make any sense to me or a lot of other geneticists at the time, because if there were a gay gene, let's say that such a thing existed, then clearly, in these present day anyway, I think it's probably true that male homosexuals have less offspring, less children than straight men. So that gay gene, if a man had it, a gay man had it, he would not be passing it on to the next generation. And under those circumstances, it's very, very difficult to see how gay genes would have really ever got to the present generation, if you like, at anywhere like the numbers that was the sole cause of male homosexuality. Those genes would not have got through.
Professor, do you believe there will ever be any discovery in genetics that ties itself to homosexuality?
Well, that's what I was going to go on to. I've had a look back at the original papers that purported to find and reported the gay gene, and I've sort of come to the conclusion, I mean, it's a very tentative and provocative proposal, that there is no such thing as a gay gene itself, but that there is, that male homosexuality, and don't ask me about female homosexuality because it doesn't apply, is actually the one consequence of a very fundamental genetic battle that's going on between the Y-chromosome on one hand and these other genetic entities called mitochondria on the other. So
in a way, my emailer, Arlene, was sort of onto something. Maybe.
Yes. I believe there is, the genetics is, that there is a genetic component to male homosexuality, but it's not a gay gene as such.
I understand. But what you're suggesting is fascinating, and what you're suggesting would mean that as this process continues, generation after generation, the numbers of homosexuals, if that's true, would probably increase, wouldn't they?
Well, I think you're misunderstanding what I'm saying, actually.
I guess I am.
I'm not saying that it's got anything intrinsically to do with the Y-chromosome decay that we've been talking about. It's to do with the battle between mitochondria on the one hand and Y-chromosomes on the other. Those two have entirely different genetic agendas. So, mitochondria, which are passed from mother to daughter and so on through the generations, they have absolutely no interest. Of course, we're kind of anthropomorphizing these genes, but it's helpful to look at them in that way. They have no interest. A woman's mitochondria has no interest in her ever having sons, because that mitochondria is not going to get anywhere through her having sons. In the same way, Y-chromosomes, a man's Y-chromosome has no interest at all in him having daughters. So here you have two polar opposites in these, and if you believe, as I do and many others do, that genes actually are a very important determinant of evolution, then to have that real completely different conflict of interest between two genes is going to play out in many ways. And looking, for example, taking the mitochondria, the one that, if you like, the one that is going from female to female, has no interest whatsoever in males. It's now emerging that if males do inherit mitochondria, but they don't pass it on because there's none in sperm to speak of. But so mitochondria have no interest in males, and it's now emerging that quite a lot of diseases which men get, including aging and many of these other things, which men suffer earlier than women, is actually caused by mitochondrial decay. So what I'm getting at here in a very roundabout way is that mitochondria are slowly killing men and preserving women. That's why so many people think that men get older quicker and die younger than women. And so what's got to do with homosexuality? Well, the other thing that mitochondria do is to, that women do, unconsciously of course, is that they do often abort unconsciously at a very early age, miscarry, and the first there's an excess of male fetuses that are miscarried in the very first few weeks of pregnancy, often unknown. Women don't know they're even pregnant when this happens. And you could, and I do suggest in my book that this is another aspect of mitochondria trying to destroy male fetuses.
Wow. That's pretty controversial, all right.
Well, it's controversial, and a thing about being a geneticist is that you kind of, you think about things sometimes and you have to in a rather impersonal way, but then, of course, naturally, you sort of say these things, interpreting them on a sort of very large evolutionary time scale. And, of course, especially late miscarriages are absolute tragedies. Early ones, very early ones, often not known about. But I think the war between mitochondria and the Y-chromosome is so bitter that it wouldn't stop at that. Now, what about the Y-chromosomes? How do they sort of fight back? Well, Y-chromosomes themselves are in rather a weak position because they're very vulnerable. If this war really is going on, which I believe it is, they're very vulnerable in those 9 months that they spend when going from one generation to another in the body of a woman. And so they must fight back against this tendency to try and eliminate all male fetuses, which mitochondria have. And here's where the male homosexuality comes in. Since there is a balance, there must be a balance between these two forces, otherwise one would have dominated already, then there's a possibility, and there's evidence to suggest this looking back at the original pedigrees, the family studies where the gay gene was first found, that male homosexuals have fewer uncles than aunts. That's their mothers have got fewer brothers and sisters, which, if we meld this into this idea I was just been talking about, suggests that male homosexuals' mothers, their own mothers, have been actually very adept at eliminating male fetuses.
I was going to say winning the battle.
Yeah, they've won the battle. So what is the next stage if you can't kill a male fetus? What's the next best thing you can do? And that is to make sure that Y chromosomes don't succeed the next generation, is to, if you can, to adjust their sexual preference so that they never breed.
It's insidious.
Otherwise they become homosexual.
Yes, it's insidious, isn't it?
It's very insidious, and it's one way that, as a geneticist, that I look at this battle. But it's a very, very interesting, a very, very deadly battle that's going on between.
Well, I think, Professor, what I was trying to ask is it a static standoff, or is the victory increasingly going to the women?
Well, in the case of homosexuality, as I said, I don't know the statistics about whether or not the male homosexuality is increasing, and I don't know the figures about that. And what I'm just suggesting, which is really sticking my neck out, but it's just basically food for thought.
I certainly caught what you're suggesting.
Yeah.
Professor, hold on a moment. We'll get right back to you. Within the women's body, there's a war going on. It's a war against males, actually, and the war is being won by the females. And the result of that, in one particular case, might be homosexuality. I'm Art Bell. Once again, you're listening to one of the world's greatest geneticists, Professor Bryan Sykes. And here he is. We were... I guess I was asking you, and I'll try again, whether you think or even would like to take a guess about whether this process is a static process, and whether it would continue to produce in the population as this war goes on against males. A similar number of those with an inclination to homosexuality, or whether it's also part of the overall battle that's going to ultimately be lost. I mean, that.
I suppose. Thinking about it, and I haven't predicted anything in the book, but if mitochondria, which is according to this idea that I put forward in the book, is at least partially responsible for male homosexuality. Mm-hmm. If they get very good at it, they will succeed better than mitochondria that aren't quite so good at it. Yes. And so I guess the predicted outcome from that would be that male homosexuality would increase. Interestingly,
Adam from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Adam, can you believe it? Says, fascinating show, Art. I'm a gay male, and I have now taken notice of the fact that my mom has 4 sisters, no brothers. My grandma on her side of the family had 3 sisters, no brothers. Mm-hmm. Wow. Interesting.
Yep. I mean, you'd obviously have to have a lot more examples of that, but I suppose, that's an interesting family. I think the studies which I quote in Adam's Curse are, involve hundreds of gay men, and actually I could have. I'll quickly look it up while we're talking.
You might want to hit the database on that one.
Well, it's called a book. That's chapter 23.
Well, that's all right. I mean, as you get to it, you can get to it.
It was. It's. I will get to it.
Mm-hmm. Does this ultimately really mean, Professor?
Here we are, I've got it.
Okay. Yes.
A survey of nearly 500 gay men.
Yes.
Their mothers had a total of 209 sisters, but only 132 brothers.
Holy smokes.
Yep. So of course, they should have had equal numbers of brothers.
Oh, yeah, indeed, or very close.
So that's an impressive figure. Adam, from where was he from?
You might, Milwaukee.
Milwaukee, okay. Well,
you might have another book here.
But 209 against 132 is pretty skewed, isn't it?
It is. It's still, I suppose, from a scientific point of view, a small sample relatively, but yes,
well,
it's
I
very.
don't know. I mean, well, it's not that small actually. I mean, 209 to 132 is very significant. Even though, of course, it's not absolutely huge, but it's a very significant.
Well, shouldn't it be so significant as to cause more immediate research?
Well, it's very odd, actually. Reading about the genetics of research into homosexuality from a genetic point of view, I mean, there was these papers that we've mentioned that came out about just over 10 years ago, and there was another paper that followed up to agree with the first one or corroborate the findings, and then there was a third paper which disagreed. That's actually not uncommon in genetics. And then nothing. So it's been totally dropped from the research agenda, as far as I can see.
Well, that alone is fascinating. As big of an issue, and it's a giant issue socially, so I'm really quite surprised that it's not being followed up on.
Well, it did cause a lot of stir at the time. I think it's...
Sure.
I know a lot of gay men... I wasn't involved in this original research at all, but I've just, in my researching for Adam's Curse, read about the reactions to this. And while a lot of gay men welcomed this research, and many have said quite vehemently that research into the genetics of male homosexuality should not be done at all. But certainly the fact is that nothing has been done. But I think maybe this new angle that I'm hinting at, that there's no gay gene, but that male homosexuality is a consequence of this, this deeply embedded war, may stimulate a bit more research. I don't know.
Would you think that if something were proven in this area, Professor, that society would then view that as a disease, or do you think society would be sold on the fact that it's just part of a unavoidable evolutionary change?
It certainly wouldn't be a disease. It certainly isn't a disease. It's as I said, it's part of this deeply embedded and irreconcilable conflict, genetic conflict that goes on between men and women, between male and female.
I clearly have that. I just wonder if that would promote a general acceptance of that fact as opposed to what we have now.
Well, there are reminiscences of this kind of thing in other animals. I mean, there are actually other animals in which the war between the mitochondria and males goes on in many other animals. In fact, some insects, we're going a little off subject here, but some insects, for example, actually the mitochondria and other associated genes in the cell cytoplasm, as it's called, outside the nucleus, actually kill male embryos. I mean, stone dead. I mean, it's been observed, extremely well documented. But the production of homosexual offspring has actually also been recorded in some other animals.
Many argue that's not true, and they use that as a platform to launch. Anyway, you're saying it is true.
Yes, it's certainly true in other animals. But what the situation, as I'm proposing, that it worth at least some serious examination, is very reminiscent of a type of genetic altruism. So, to cut a long story short, I don't think that male homosexuality in my plan, my idea, is a disease at all, but it's actually an example of genetic altruism. And the reason is that if a mitochondria that had produced a homosexual son, if that son did not marry but actually helped, this is complicated, so hold on, actually helped his mother bring up his sisters, that mitochondria would have a huge advantage and would spread. And that is a piece of genetic altruism whereby you're helping your own genes get through the next generation, not through yourself, but through your relatives. Sorry, it's seen a lot in other animals.
So on the side of the ultimate winners.
Yes, that's right.
Would be a way to consider it.
It's an altruism. It's certainly not a disease.
Yes, fascinating. Oh, fascinating. All right.
You see what us geneticists get up to every day.
I guess I do. Yes, I guess I do. Is there any way that you see that, and I bet there are many for you, that man will survive this, that man will learn to manipulate ourselves, if we so desire, back to a capital Y? And I suppose you have mixed feelings about that, but...
Right, okay, yes. Well, naturally, because I think this process of decay will carry on, I have thoughts, well, what can be done about it? Well, actually, it can be arrested by taking those genes which we know are necessary on the Y-chromosome and rescuing them, taking them off, and by genetic manipulation, putting them onto other chromosomes out of harm's way, if you like.
Really messing with Mother Nature.
Well, really messing with it, yeah.
And could it be that the only ultimate survival, remember we were speculating about whether the world would even survive that long?
Yes.
Could it be that for the ultimate survival of the species, this deterioration and final collapse of the Y chromosome has to happen? And if it doesn't happen, then the world will end.
Well, you've actually put your finger on it there, Art. Yeah. Now, the question is, if the Y chromosome goes, or when the Y chromosome goes, and if there's no genetic manipulation solution, what will happen then? Well, as things stand, of course, if males disappear, then women will also disappear as well. The whole species will become extinct. But I proposed in my book, which I finished writing about a year ago, that it wouldn't be long before it was possible to create an embryo and eventually a human by fertilizing an egg, not with a sperm, but with another egg. So this would be where you took an egg from one woman and you mixed it, you injected essentially the egg or the chromosomes of an egg from another woman,
right,
and produced reimplanted that. You'd have to use the sort of in vitro fertilization techniques that we now have, implanted that back into one of the women, and that would produce a girl, and it would be a perfectly normal girl. Now,
with genetic characteristics of both parents.
With genetic characteristics of both parents. The only difference would be that both the parents would be women.
Female, yeah, got it.
Now, I thought this was going to take a long time, but believe it or not, the week before last, there's a report in the journal Nature of exactly this having been done with a mouse. Some Japanese and Korean scientists took the egg from one mouse and fused it with the egg from another, and created a female mouse, which was born, and from all appearances was completely normal. In fact, went on to have a litter of her own. So it looks as though that is a distinct possibility that the species could survive by fusing one egg with another and reproducing in that way without males whatsoever. Because of this mouse, the Japanese mouse, had no father and had no genetic input from a male at all.
But assuming an artificial womb, then men could do the same thing.
Well, men could if you had an artificial womb. Yes, they could.
Well, if we're going to look 100,000 years into the future,
if they have artificial wombs, and you're treating them as sperm as if it were an egg, they really are, for all intents and purposes, females anyway.
And so
it's complicated, doesn't it?
Yes,
but what you were saying is very apt as well.
Well, we're talking about cloning here.
Well, we're not talking about cloning. We'll come back to that. But would the world be more likely to survive if there were only women and no longer men?
Clearly, most people would answer yes.
Well, what do you think?
You want honesty, right?
Yes.
I think the world would have a far better chance of survival if it were women that inherited.
I agree.
That's sort of embarrassing and, hard to admit. But it might not be as magnificent a place, Professor.
Certainly wouldn't be.
Without all those Ys.
Certainly not so much fun. And
clearly.
And not so interesting, but probably more peaceful, I think. We were then touching on what the Japanese had done, and the Japanese who created this mouse. This mouse, importantly, would not be a clone. That's very important.
Gotcha.
It's the same kind of natural mixture of genes as any other normal girl, because it had two different biological parents.
Mm-hmm.
Cloning will never really work in the long term for any species. And the reason is, interestingly enough, that cloning, of course, produces genetically identical copies of an organism, of an animal,
right,
a plant.
Right.
And that's fine. It's actually a very efficient way of reproducing, except that you're very vulnerable to being wiped out by parasites or pathogens. And we can see exactly this happening in the banana crop, of all things, in South America and Costa Rica. What's happened there is that all the bananas, in fact all the bananas in the world, are clones. They're all reproduced. They don't reproduce sexually. They reproduce by cloning. They're just taken, one sort of cutting is taken and then transplanted onto another root.
Yes.
So what's happened in South America is that a fungus has unlocked the key to killing off one banana plant, if you like, and because all the other banana plants are genetically identical, it's now sweeping right across South America, and it will eventually decimate it's already doing it, decimate the banana the crop.
So as one is vulnerable, all are vulnerable since they're cloned, and so you're telling me it's the end of bananas?
Yeah.
That was yes?
Yes, it's the end of the bananas, unless something's done about it, unless they introduce non-cloning reproduction eventually. It is a serious threat. I mean, it's not me that's saying it's the end of bananas.
Well, that's horrible. That's horrible.
Yeah, but that's the danger of cloning. So any species that relies on reproduction without sex, without males and females, is taking that risk. We, of course, and the reason is that you have genetic identity, but and that's actually why sexual reproduction with males and females takes place at all. It's so that you mix up the genes at each generation and you protect the species against this kind of mass elimination by parasites or funguses or viruses or whatever. So in our case, there's been tremendous epidemics, pandemics even. There's one going on with AIDS, of course, now, but it won't kill everybody because there's enough genetic variation to make sure a few survive at the very least. Right.
Since you're a geneticist, I've really got what I think is a good question for you. Many times on this program we talk about aliens as in from another, world, another planet, another whatever.
Okay.
And they're lovingly called grays. And I've always wondered, with all the interracial breeding that's going on, and boy, there's a lot of it going on in the world right now, eventually, and it would be you that I'd have to ask, and I will after the break, won't we all be grays? Aren't we on the way to becoming the grays ourselves? Think about that. Aren't we well underway right now? Aren't we headed toward becoming what we talk about? It is interesting, isn't it? I mean, that what are depicted on the screen and in popular literature all over the world as the aliens, in quotes, they're the grays, right? And if you think about it, they're all females. I mean, just a thought, folks. Professor, since I have you here, I really would like to ask you a little bit about this. I mean, aren't we in the process of becoming the grays?
You'll have to explain a bit more what you mean, really.
Okay. What I mean by that is, in America now, why things have changed. Black people are no longer slaves. They're in our media. They have sex appeal. Asians are in our media. We have some of our biggest pop stars now. In other words, in our culture, we have really mixed. I mean, we have mixed marriages going on all over the place. A lot of people don't like it. That's fine for them, but it's happening.
Yep.
And the result of those mixed marriages ultimately is going to, is it not, erase the distinction between the variants?
Well, if you sort of, supposing just, to paint a completely fanciful scenario, supposing you sealed the borders now, and within America, that everyone, that sort of husbands and wives marriages were totally random. That's to say, you wouldn't necessarily marry into someone in your ethnic group, which of course happens a lot. Eventually, you'd find that there would be a great sharing of characteristics, genetic characteristics, and more uniformity. Yes, you would.
Yes.
You would.
Yes, exactly. And that process is perhaps in its beginnings from an evolutionary point of view, but gee, I wonder how many generations of mixture you'd have to look at before you finally got to pretty much of a constant, or what appeared to be a constant anyway. Well, it would ultimately occur, would it not?
The thing is, though, Art, that if you look back at the history of the world, and you can sort of glimpse this through genetic spectacles or telescope, if you like, you soon realize that actually this kind of mixing that you're talking about that's happening out in America has actually always been happening. It's been happening ever since we started to evolve. There's never been any such thing as a pure race or a pure ethnic group.
No, it's not
they
always.
themselves are mixtures.
Yes, but it's not always been socially as acceptable as it is now, and so it's proliferating.
Well, it's hard to say whether it was socially acceptable or not in the past, but it certainly has always gone on. And I think what we're seeing in America and other parts of the world, of course, is really a mixing of people that in not so long in the past were geographically separated by large distances.
That's right. Yes.
But it's a fallacy to think that mixing of this kind has not been going on throughout the entire history of human evolution.
Is it not genetically actually advantageous to have a very dissimilar mixture occur? Isn't the offspring frequently of these dissimilar mixtures advantaged in some manner because of the dissimilar nature of the genetic makeup? Is that true? Is that true?
Well, we're sort of going back to getting into dangerous territory here. I mean, because
I live on dangerous territory.
Right. Okay. But there was a period. For example, if you not talking about humans now, but crossing different strains of plants, for example, there is a phenomenon called hybrid vigor. Called hybrid vigor, and that aptly describes exactly what it is. That if you have hybrids, which in the plant sense means crossing different strains together,
right?
Slightly genetically different, then you did get a
very robust.
Yes, a robust form. But what probably you don't realise in humans is that actually we're really, even though we may not think we are, or even think we look like it, we actually are an extraordinarily recent species. So there hasn't been time for significant genetic differences to build up between people who live in different parts of the world. So that means that hybrid vigor, as it's called amongst the plants, where you're actually taking quite genetically dissimilar strains and crossing those and seeing a more vigorous hybrid than when you looked at those separate strains. We just haven't really had enough time to develop sufficiently distinct genetic differences between different people in different parts of the world. We are an incredibly recent species.
Mm-hmm.
We originated in Africa, Homo sapiens, only an astonishingly short time ago, perhaps 150,000 years, which is nothing really compared to most other species that are around.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and actually that's one of the sort of byproducts of the kind of research I've been doing as well on mitochondria and on Y-chromosomes. You can track back through time to show that everyone on the planet is actually very closely related.
Mm-hmm.
And getting back to your question of hybrid vigor, if you like, because everyone is really so very genetically similar, you won't see any great improvements by any mixing of people who have lived in completely different parts of the world.
Mm-hmm. So we're so basically similar that you're not going to get hybrid vigor, is what you're saying.
That's right.
Very interesting. All right, listen, this is a talk show, and we like to take calls. So I'm going to take a few, and let's see how we do. First time caller line, you're on the air with Professor Sykes. Hi.
Hi there.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes. First time caller line, you're on the air. Now or never.
Hello?
Hello. I almost hung up on you, dear. You're slow on the draw there. What?
All right.
You're on the air.
Liaison from San Antonio.
Yes.
Men win the war on women every few minutes with well-documented rapes, beatings, and murders. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Since women can't even get help with housework, the equal reaction is on a small scale. Female might in mitochondria. Men blaming women for own karmic boomerang is a typical Jungian and male pattern of projecting the shadow self. Cause all their wars. Men who take all the power, profit, and pleasure from themselves just can't figure out why the third world and women, terrified continuously by violence and poverty, might reflect it back in desperate suicide terrorism. Also, male homosexuality to women is just another war front affront. The only men who dress well and do their own laundry and have charm and wit, these men are the answer to what do women want.
Are you one of Professor Sykes' students?
No.
No.
I'm nearly finished. But gay men withhold romance, which is women's obsession and orgasm for other men. And straight men satisfy their desires with prostitution, computer porn, phone sex, and strippers.
Okay.
In this man's world, women's only other employment opportunities are as nurses and maids.
Mm-hmm.
Is it any wonder that Mother Nature, as a conscious Gaia force, perhaps has an alternative evolution beyond male labs and ET?
Yikes.
So the irresponsible drugs and bad diet and everything are part of the degeneration of the genes.
All right. Well, while you're ahead.
That wasn't a question, but that was, I really think that was great.
These are the kinds of things that happen when you open the phone line, Professor.
It is, but I must say that it doesn't sound like that lady will miss men too much in the future.
No, I got that sense. I definitely got that sense. And I guess, in a way, what she just said sort of underlines everything you've been saying, doesn't it?
Well, I'm sure she'll enjoy reading Adam's Curse.
Okay. Wildcard line, you're on the air with Professor Sykes. Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Yes, hello.
Hey, it's a very much a privilege, and that young lady was right on target. I hate to say it. And this month, I'm a Taurus.
Yeah, you're a sympathizer,
Earth,
too. You're a sympathizer, aren't you?
I'm a sympathizer with her. But my question is the value of man and woman with stem cell research and cloning. They could eliminate us both very easily. And how much spiritual and...
Well, but wait a minute. Stop right there. First of all, I think that the professor destroyed your cloning thought.
Okay. Okay, yes. But anyway, the thing with the men in power and whatnot that can do what they want to with women, that pretty much is gone. That's out the window. Women have the power now to control a lot of things.
All right. Professor, now he makes a very good point. If you look at the social, the way we are presently socially constructed in the United States, there certainly has been a sea change, hasn't there?
Yes, there has. But it certainly hasn't occurred all over the world. There's, in many other countries, women are just as badly treated as they ever were.
That's true.
So, yes, you're absolutely right. There's huge changes taking place now in America and in European countries. And
yes, and where freedom rings, these changes are occurring.
They are, that's right. And they're all to the good as far as I can see. But what can I say? I mean, it won't arrest the decline of the Y-chromosome, but let's hope it arrests this, the other effects of Adam's curse that we've been talking about.
You know, Professor, I'm really curious. When you had the news release that flashed around the world about all of this those months ago,
yes,
what kind of reaction was there?
Okay, well, I've all sorts of reactions really, but I mean, one, I've been accused quite often of sort of being a traitor to the male sex, if you like, to my own gender. And on that, actually, I think it would have been hard to write this book if I'd been a woman, actually, because I would have been then accused of having of my own agenda, actually. So there was some quite vicious letters and emails that I was somehow letting men down, as it were.
Well, yeah.
I don't really see it like that at all. But
of course not. But they were. You said the word vicious.
Yes.
Yes. People don't understand how very difficult it is to be a messenger. And how perilous. It's truly perilous to be a messenger, particularly of this kind of news.
Well, I mean, in a way, they didn't amount to anything, I'm glad to say, but in a way they kind of prove the point, really, don't they?
So, anyway. In other words, you accepted most of those emails as evidence.
And then there were... but then they were equally balanced, or balanced far more by people who, I mean, of course, the press release and what happened went out around the wires and stuff. It was only a very summary, really. But I mean, so they were balanced by many messages which. Well, I'm not exactly looking forward to the end of men.
Well, let's put it right out there. How many sounded like that young lady?
Well, not very many, actually, because what was interesting was that when I've asked people, and I've had responses to, well, even though a lot of women say, well, men are utterly useless and all the rest of it, we've heard that incantation for many, many years now. But actually, women have said, oh no, I mean, a world without men would be utterly awful. So not like that lady from San Antonio, was it? So I think, in a sense, of course, when it actually happened, of course, men would be completely forgotten. I mean, like the dodo or something like that, never would have been known. But certainly, a world without men would be extremely difficult and different, and would be more boring, I guess.
Well, maybe so, but I'll tell you, that lady could have been their leader.
Yes, she could. And I mean, I hope she enjoys reading Adam's Curse because she'll find a lot of things, even more ammunition for her poetry and prose.
Well, all right. If she wants Adam's Curse, where would she go? I mean, would it probably be Amazon.com?
You can get it from Amazon. It's, but as I say, it was published last Monday, so in the United States, so it's in Barnes and Noble and all good bookshops, as they say.
Excellent. I'm sure many will be on their way east of the Rockies. You're on the air with Professor Sykes. Hello.
Hi. I was wondering about pollution, especially those that mimic estrogen, called estrogenic compounds. I was listening to a terribly disturbing study by Dr. Steve Nugent, who was at one time the president of the American Naturopaths. And he was saying that not only is male sterility on the rise of all species all over the world, but also some intersex births, or hermaphrodites, which is what the grays are supposed to be, not female, but hermaphrodites. So my question is, are you aware of any of this affecting maleness?
Yes. In fact, in Adam's Curse, I've got a chapter on this, and it certainly seems to be true that male infertility, and particularly as judged by sperm count, for example, has been going down quite rapidly in the last 50 years all over the world. And although it's not absolutely certain what the cause for this is, certainly the finger has been pointed at pollutants, as you say, that mimic estrogens, and things in our diet and in the environment that were not there before. And some even quite healthy sounding things actually do mimic estrogens, like soya beans, for example. There's an estrogen-like compound in soya beans. Also, some plasticizers have an estrogen-like activity, and that's again not entirely proven, but it is thought to be at least one of the major reasons why the sperm count in men is going down. Now, in Adam's Curse, I kind of treat that as another irony, in the sense that, and actually, in fact, the lady from San Antonio drew a parallel between the feminine and Gaia, the goddess of the world.
Oh, she did.
She did, and so getting back to another argument, trying to get all these arguments together.
All right, Professor, do get them together.
I will after the break.
We're here. There you go. Boy, he's getting good. See, you're on radio for a little while. You learn about these breaks very quickly. The lady from San Antonio. Oh, she said it all, huh? Adam's Curse is the name of the book. It's a book you're really going to want. It's just out by Bryan Sykes, author of the best-selling The Seven Daughters of Eve. Once again, Adam's Curse is the name of the book, and you absolutely are going to want to grab this as quickly as you can. I can tell you I'm going to be reading it quite quickly. Professor, you have, I just noticed, you have an entire chapter called Gaia's Revenge.
That's right, yes, and getting back to what we were talking about before the break.
Yes.
And putting a lot of arguments together, and the way in which sexual selection has led to the accumulation of wealth and power, and how that has shaped the modern world, really, while at the same time, in its battle against the feminine, has polluted the modern world. And Gaia's Revenge is all about how the feminine, in two respects. First of all, well, let's talk about the pollution. That isn't it ironic, and that the world seen as a feminine entity, as Gaia, the Earth goddess, is hitting back at males in just the place it hurts. That's to say, by the pollutants dropping the sperm count. Now, just when I say that, just in the question of, in a couple of sentences, I sound like completely bananas. But in fact, I do develop that theme a little more carefully in that chapter, Gaia's Revenge.
Well, it may have a lot in common with bananas. West of the Rockies, you're on the air with Professor Sykes. Hello. Hello?
Hello, Art?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'd like to ask your guest, since he's already cited male homosexuality as a possible means by which the mitochondrion strikes back at the Y-chromosome, whether any studies have ever been done about female autism. How many uncles do autists who are female have versus aunts? Because I was wondering if this could not be yet another kink in this war, whether this could be the Y-chromosome striking back again at the mitochondria and saying, well, okay, I'll see that women are born, but that when they're born, they aren't going to really want to reproduce all that much, be able to take care of their kids, be able to act in the ways that, well, never mind attracting men, will be able to keep them around.
Yes.
Will be able to keep a husband and father around. I ask this because I have it, and I am related to a woman who is absolutely crippled with the same condition. I have many more uncles, many more male relatives on my father's side than female, and I have somewhat more relatives on my mother's side than female. My mother's half-brother, who
okay, well, you don't have to go on. By extension, it's a wonderful question, Professor.
It is a wonderful question, isn't it? And the only thing is, I don't have a wonderful answer, I'm afraid. It's an absolutely brilliant question, and I'm ashamed to say I've never considered it. I know that there is a genetic input to autism, and certain genes have been implicated in it, but I've never considered it as the opposite way around. That if you like, the Y chromosome battling against the mitochondrion. But since that is such a deeply embedded war, it's certainly something, as soon as I get back to Oxford, I will have a look at. But so thank you very much. I'm really sorry that I haven't got an answer to the question.
That's quite all right. First time caller line, you're on the air with Professor Sykes. Hello.
Hi, is that me?
That's you.
Oh, good. Okay, I guess this relates a little bit to the former caller, but I remember when I was in university and we studied double Y individuals, and these are men with the XYY with a double Y gene.
Yes.
And they were very aggressive, and there were studies done that showed that many prisoners have this double Y.
I actually think that it has been proffered as a defense, a legal defense.
Well,
so I was wondering if it's still happening, and how it happens, if it's part of the study.
All right, Professor.
Can I answer that question?
Yes. Yes.
Well, it's certainly true that amongst inmates in prisons, that there's a higher proportion of men with two Y chromosomes than among the normal population. But there's plenty of men in the normal population with two Y chromosomes who are not in the least bit criminally inclined. And when those results were first produced probably 20 years ago now, then clearly the explanation that, well, they got double dose of this dangerous chromosome was accepted, and it all seemed to fit in very well. What's since happened is that there's now that it's probably not as stark as we thought. It's just the fact that they've got 3 chromosomes when they should have 2.
Yes.
And there are other those types of diseases where you have too many chromosomes that are also found at higher frequencies in prisons and amongst offenders.
But if you look at very well-to-do, famous, or powerful men, Professor, do you think that you might see a higher percentage of double Ys?
It's possible, but that's not been done as far as I know.
I see. All right.
Maybe we should start.
Maybe we should. Wildcard line, you're on the air with Professor Sykes. Good morning.
Yeah, hello?
Hello.
Yeah. Professor, you're very interesting. Earlier, and of course just now, you mentioned that the mitochondria attacks the Y chromosomes. I'm assuming then, and I want to make sure if you do or not, that you accept that fertilization and mitosis is based on the theory of epigenesis?
Theory of?
Is that correct?
I'm sorry, could you...
You accept then epigenesis?
Oh, epigenesis.
Yeah.
Epigenesis.
It's the basis for mitosis and fertilization. Because I have another question.
Well, all right. Hold on. I don't even understand.
Well, epigenesis is the term that means the genetic impact and influence of things that lie outside the chromosomes.
Okay.
Okay.
Hold on, caller. Caller.
So what mitochondria and what we've been talking about with mitochondria is strictly speaking epigenesis. So yes.
Okay, now if that is the case, have you heard or do you believe in the possibility of the theory of parthenogenesis? That there are 2 vestigial glands, the paroupharine and the upulpharine, that a female has in the menstrual suffix that is now somewhat dormant, and that this also might be the cause for dermoid cyst, for virgin birth in this.
Yeah, okay.
All right.
So parthenogenesis is where some animals actually, and it's been thought that occasionally women will produce children without men, without having their eggs fertilized at all. I mean, it's never been proven in the case of any humans, but certainly that's the way that many animals reproduce. But of course, they produce clones in that way. So strictly speaking, it's very unlikely to happen in humans, but it's not entirely ruled out. But if there were any examples of it, then the offspring would be an identical clone to the mother. And genetic tests nowadays would prove that very easily. So
and then
we'll
we'd
have
be
to wait and see.
genetically, or we'd be right back to the banana problem, wouldn't we?
Yeah, we would. Yeah, it'd be hopeless.
East of the Rockies, you're on the air with Professor Sykes. Hello.
Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for a very exciting and enlightening program. My name is Paula. I'm calling from Canton, Ohio, listening to you out of Akron over 6:40 a.m. WHLO.
Yes.
And I had two questions for Dr. Sykes. It is Sykes, right? S-I-K-E-S?
No, S-Y-K-E-S.
S-Y, thank you. I wanted to know, first off, in the Orient, when female babies were born, they were killed upon birth, and not so that they wanted to get rid of the females. Okay, did that have any impact on the male babies? Did they finally produce more male babies there then? And question number two, I will preface this, Art, with you having had so many guests on your program between you and George over the years about ETs, or maybe us from the future coming back and doing medical, I don't know, genetic manipulation maybe, or experiments, taking eggs and sperm from males and females, because the thought was their race was dying out.
Yes.
So does Dr. Sykes think, or is he, with him being a geneticist and a scientist, is his research into this Y-chromosome thing, does that have any bearing on the ETs, or maybe it's just us coming
that one's
back?
over the top for current discussion.
Well, actually, can I answer both those questions?
Yeah, you sure can.
Okay, the first one was about female babies being killed
in China.
In China and in India.
Yes, indeed.
And also abortions done selectively to destroy female children.
Yes.
That in Adam's case, it's interesting how many themes from your listeners are reproducing animals. Because I do talk about that. I feel that is another way, a conscious way in which the Y chromosome is being propagated by the purposeful and deliberate murder of young girls. So that's one thing. As to aliens coming in from the future, or getting into the gene pool, as it were. In all the work I and others done to sort of reconstruct human evolution, we've never seen any DNA from anything that was so completely non-human. So it's not exactly a complete answer, but we haven't seen any DNA from anything that doesn't fit quite well with what we know to be human DNA. So, although I know that wasn't the question, if there'd been any massive interbreeding with aliens, we would have seen it.
Perhaps so. But there is a lot of discussion about a race of aliens that might have failing DNA. And interestingly enough, what you have told us tonight really is that
could be us then, couldn't it?
Well, it could be us, yes, couldn't it? Exactly.
And aren't we planning to go to Mars?
That we have failing DNA.
Yes, well,
just incredible. International line, you're on the air with Professor Sykes. Good morning.
Oh, good morning. Hi. I thought it was funny what you said earlier, Art, about that ETs or aliens are all depicted as females. I totally forgot about that, but I was thinking, how do you know they're females and not some other sexual
it just
identity?
hit me like a brick. I mean, we were talking about grays, and, we're intermarrying like crazy, and we're eventually all going to be sort of grays or similar in some way, many hundreds of generations down the line if we last that long. And, when you see grays on TV or whatever, they're always female.
That's what I was thinking about. Maybe it's another sex altogether, as in parthenogenesis,
Well,
or completely androgynous. But I had two questions, one about chromosomes and embryos, and the other one about Darwinian theory. So I just wanted to ask your guest, Bryan, I wanted to get some clarification on this. If the female chromosome is XX and the male chromosome is XY, wouldn't, in your opinion, make X the standard chromosome and Y the different or the deviant one?
Yep, it does.
That was a yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was definitely a yes.
And
So,
also,
so the Y is a decayed X, no doubt about that.
But also, the male embryo, you were saying, originates as female and then turns into male somewhere down the line. And I guess wouldn't proof of that be in why males have nipples?
Well, that's a sort of vestigial characteristic. Interestingly, some males can produce milk through their nipples.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I'd have heard that too.
And Darwin was known for his theory on survival of the fittest, or survival of the most adaptable, as it were. Yeah. So, if his theory is true, and well, wouldn't the longevity of the human male species rely on becoming more adaptable to the world or environment around him? And what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, well, not all species manage to adapt, though. So that's the problem. That when the environment changes, some species, and we've seen extinctions. Most species become extinct, of course. That it's not necessary that we or any other species will be able to adapt to changes, and the faster they happen, the less likely we are to adapt. Actually, interestingly, the average life expectancy of a species when it becomes extinct is only 100,000 years. So extinctions are happening all the time.
With some rare exceptions, there are some animals that have been around very long.
Oh, of course, yes, but that's the average length of a species. Not very long at all.
Professor, as a geneticist, how do you feel about how close we're beginning to get to the ability to manipulate our own genetic makeup, to be our own creators, to be our own God? It almost amounts to that as people think of God.
Well, actually, even though I am a geneticist, I'm not in favor of the wholesale interference with our genetic makeup. For example, even though I personally wouldn't have much objection to a child born, say, from two mothers, say a lesbian couple, and sort of sticking my neck out, I think that will happen in my own lifetime. I'm not in favor of wholesale genetic manipulation to try and improve individuals' offspring. Certainly not in favor of cloning. I think there's a lot of there's mystery, there's wonder in our genetic variability and our genetic heritage that we've got from our ancestors, and I think it should be, except in the case of very severe diseases, left to its own devices.
But necessarily, as the science for the diseases progresses, the ability to do other things comes with it, doesn't it?
It does, and I think there will be, and we have to be very careful about this, there will be the inclination to try and design your own offspring as being the perfect child, as it were.
Yes.
Great dangers in that, not only from an ethical point of view, which I think are overwhelmingly argue against it, also great dangers because it's very clear that genes do many things. So you might want to alter a gene, for example, to produce a trait which you find attractive in a child, and find that actually it interferes with another gene or another pathway somewhere and gives that child a severe disadvantage. So it's too complicated, it's unethical, and I certainly won't look forward to that day.
The law of unintended consequences.
Absolutely.
It has been said, our time is gone. I mean, that's it. Poof. You were worried about staying awake. Here you are. We're done.
We are.
Yeah, we're done. We're out of time. Your book, did you write this so the average person?
Absolutely. It's not for scientists. It's for everybody. It's written. You don't have to know any science to read it, really.
Well, that's wonderful, and I think a lot of people are going to chase after it. It's called Adam's Curse. The author, my guest, Bryan Sykes, that's S-Y-K-E-S. Get to your bookstore, get to Amazon, get to wherever you can get and grab it up. Professor, it has been an honor, truly an honor to have you on.
Well, it's very kind of you to say so, and it's been a great honor and a pleasure for me to be part of it. And as you say, the 3 hours has gone past in a flash.
Good night, Professor.
Good night.
Wasn't that something? Professor Bryan Sykes, and once again, Adam's Curse is his book. I think you're going to enjoy it. It was written just for you. But for me, that's it for the weekend. Your regularly scheduled programming resumes tomorrow evening. From the high desert, I'm Art Bell. Good night.
From September of 83 to August of 90, during 84, he became one of only a handful of government personnel to be personally trained as coordinate remote viewers by Ingo Swann. We've interviewed him here at SRI International. Paul was the primary author of the Government Remote Viewing Program CRV Training Manual, and served as theory instructor for new CRV training personnel, as well as recruiting officer and unit security officer. He is credited with over 1,000 training and operational remote viewing sessions during his time with the unit at Fort Meade. Raised in Boulder City, Nevada, Paul enlisted in the Army in 1976 for Arabic training, attended Officer Candidate School, was commissioned as a military intelligence officer. And there's so much more. Russell Targ is a physicist and author who was a pioneer in the development of the laser and its applications, co-founder of the Stanford Research Institute's investigation into psychic abilities in the 70s and 80s, co-author of 5 books dealing with psychic abilities, most recently with Jane Catra, Miracles of Mind, exploring non-local consciousness and spiritual healing, and The Heart of the Mind, How to Experience God Without Belief. Targ recently retired from his position as a senior staff scientist at Lockheed Martin, where he developed airborne laser systems for the detection of wind shear. Modern aircraft, as you know, are very concerned with wind shear. He now pursues ESP research in Palo Alto, California, publishes special editions of classic books in consciousness research, including Mental Radio and Experiments with Time. What do the healer, the mystic, the psychic, and the spy all have in common? They're all in touch with our interconnected mind and our community of spirit. Scientists today believe that these non-local connections found both in physics and PSI may be the most important discovery in all of science. During the 70s and 80s, Stanford Research Institute, SRI, carried out investigations of our ability to experience and describe distant events blocked from ordinary perception, i.e. remote viewing. This intuitive capacity was named remote viewing, and the research was supported by the CIA and many other U.S. government organizations for gathering intelligence about worldwide activities during the Cold War. Physicist Russell Targ, co-founder of the previously secret psychic research program, will present a summary of the evidence and applications of extrasensory perception from Cold War to today, including the latest research findings. So with us tonight, both of these gentlemen. Paul, say hello so everybody can identify your voice.
Hello.
Hi, Paul. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. How about you, Art?
Great to I'm fine. Great to have you back.
Good, thanks.
And Russell, are you there?
I'm happy to be with you this evening.
All right, great. You're both here. All right. Gentlemen, it's hard to know where to begin, but I think we should begin probably by announcing the 2001 Remote Viewing Conference. It's coming up, and that's one of the reasons you two are here tonight. What's it going to be all? Where is it, when, and what's it all about? Who would like to take that?
I'll take it, I guess. It saves Russell from having to remember these things so late at night. I like to tease him. The conference is going to be in Las Vegas, Nevada, the 15th through the 17th of June. And we've got quite a lineup. We've got over 20 speakers, ranging from the legendary Edgar Mitchell and the very prestigious Dean Radin, and of course Russell Targ, down to a number of other people who all have interests and some specialty in remote viewing that they'd like to address.
So it's a gathering, eagles, of remote viewing.
I guess you could say that, yeah.
We're going to be talking about what's been done in remote viewing and showing people how they can get in touch with their own psychic abilities. So this is lectures, demonstrations, and an opportunity to talk about how this might possibly work.
All right. A lot of Americans, first of all, have no idea what remote viewing is. A lot of Americans remember the night that Ted Koppel had this 30-minute program on remote viewing, announcing to the world the CIA had been sponsoring it for 20 years, or the U.S. government, or various arms of it, including the CIA, and that the program was ending, ostensibly, they said, because it didn't work. Now, am I wrong about that, or was that officially what they said?
Well, they said it ended because it didn't work on the Koppel show. Actually, we were supported for 20 years doing operational remote viewing for the Army, DIA, CIA, and there's no program in the history of the government that would be supported for 20 years if it didn't work.
Right.
What happened is our traditional enemy went away, and we were able to use ordinary intelligence capabilities and assets rather than the very controversial remote viewing.
Well, pretty important distinction, though. You're saying, in fact, it did work.
Oh, it worked very well. In fact, we had a meeting, an investigation in Congress. I got to stand in the well of the Congress personally and have an investigation by the House Committee on Intelligence Oversight looking into some of our particularly outstanding remote viewings of Soviet weapon sites. And in front of the Congress, we were supported by our sponsors at DIA and CIA, and the Congressional Oversight Committee concluded that we were doing something useful to the government, and in the words of the military, we should press on, which we did for another decade.
All right. Would you like to, either one of you, describe for the neophytes out there or the new listeners, what in the world is remote viewing? What actually is it?
Well,
go ahead.
Okay. Of course, you did a really good job of introducing it up front, Art. Remote viewing, in its basic sense, is the ability to describe a location, an event, a person who is distant from the person doing the description, the remote viewer, so to speak, where that remote viewer has no connection with the target, and it's shielded in some way so that, under normal means, the remote viewer would have no possible way of knowing anything about it.
In what way is this different than those who walk about claiming to be psychics?
Well, it's probably related. The difference probably lies largely in the rigor with which it's done. It's done under scientific conditions. In other words, the viewer is kept blind to the target. There are certain protocols in place to make sure that happens that way. There is a certain amount of discipline involved. I like to call it martial art for the mind, because there are certain practices that tend to help one do better and be more reliable in doing this process. But you have to practice and work at it, and in fact, over time, research has shown that over time, with a lot of practice, you actually get better at it.
So somebody literally sits in a chair. There is a target assigned. They don't know what the target is. They then either draw on paper or describe what it is, without knowing what they were even supposed to be looking for. And out of the ether, they pluck this information about a place, a person, an occurrence, a weapon system, whatever.
That's a very good description of the process. In fact, to target the person, we usually use a random number. A random number that's somewhere distant from the person who's doing it, somebody assigned to stand for the target. We give them the number because we don't want them to know up front anything about the target. That actually makes things worse if they know what the target is.
Mm-hmm. In other words, it corrupts the information.
Exactly.
I can only imagine, I was in the Air Force,
mm-hmm.
and the military is a different sort of world, and I can just barely imagine, even at the highest levels, military minds meeting a mind like that of Ingo Swann or you gentlemen, and trying to come up with protocols. It must have been horrid, absolutely horrid. The military has a certain very strict way of applying everything, and to write a manual and protocols up for this to be acceptable to the military must have been almost an insane duty.
Well, the CIA was very open to this in an interesting way. They said we've had a lot of nuts coming through. However, both myself, Russ Targ, and Hal Puthoff had done laser work for the CIA, so they knew that we could do difficult things in the past. And the director of intelligence at CIA said this is very easy to test.
But that's nuts and bolts. Lasers, nuts and bolts.
That's right. The CIA sent us a physicist with geographical coordinates in latitude and longitude, and we were told, if you can describe what's at this site that's of interest to the CIA and tell us something corroborating what we already know together with something that we don't know that we can verify, we'll support your program. And our distinguished psychic, Pat Price, completely nailed their target site, which was a weapons factory in Soviet Siberia. He drew what was on the outside, could be confirmed by satellite photography. He made a spectacularly accurate drawing of the inside of the building, which was later photographed by satellite photography. And they said, whatever you're doing, however it works, we want it.
Yeah, I bet they did. And so that's how the program was born. It was born virtually on a single test, a very, very stringent test.
Yeah, the head of the CIA at that point was a lawyer. He said, I have a demonstration of ability task. Nobody else can do that. If you can't do it, get your ass out of here.
Yep.
If you can do it, we'll support you.
You have to remember that when you're dealing with the military and with the intelligence community at large, there are actually two different levels. There's one, the people that are assigned to get the job done, and they're very practical. If something works, they're generally pretty happy to use it.
Sure.
They don't ask too many questions.
Sure.
It's at the upper level, the people who are worried about their careers, worried about the political ramifications of things. They're the ones that tend to have more problems with things like remote viewing and, that kind of thing.
Okay. Can either one of you or both of you describe how this works? Does anybody really know exactly how it works?
What it appears is that our consciousness is not separate from anything in the world. That is the idea in modern physics that's very interesting to modern physicists who have nothing to do with ESP. The idea is that we live in a quantum interconnected world, as David Bohm would say, physicist. That is, the world is non-locally connected so that things appear separate on the physical quantum level are actually connected to one another. In the ESP arena, we would say that there's no separation in consciousness. So that if I'm able to target you on a distant site and ask you questions that actually have an answer, I can then guide you to find that answer even though neither of us know it.
Would it make any difference if the target was in Vladivostok or on the moon?
As far as our data show right now, distance doesn't matter at all. Now, this is an interesting idea in that we have shown in our laboratory work that it's just as easy to describe something across the room as it is across the country. And this is an idea that's coherent with the modern teachings of non-locality, that there is no separation, and experiments have been done with photons across the lab or across Europe. And the Buddhists have said, by direct experience 2,500 years ago, that separation is an illusion, that our consciousness expands to fill the universe and we can know whatever there is to know. So this is not a new idea. Mystics throughout all time have said things like this, indicating that we're connected to one another.
But how does a modern-day physicist account? I mean, this cuts across all concepts of time and space and maybe even the speed of light, and gosh, it sort of ruins a lot, doesn't it?
Well, it was Henry Stapp that you quoted earlier, said that who was the chairman of the physics department at University of California, Berkeley, said that the discovery of non-locality may be the most important discovery in all of science. The recognition in the laboratory that things that appear to be separate actually have an aspect that are connected one to the other.
Is there any limitation with regard to time? In other words, you can look across any distance, apparently. Can you look across time as well?
Well, one thing that we've determined over the years that remote viewing has been both researched and practiced is that it seems the past is just as open to investigation as the present using remote viewing.
The past as much as the present?
Yes.
And the future?
The future seems, as I say it, harder to do.
Harder to do or impossible?
It's not impossible. Every once in a while something will happen in a predictive sense where someone makes a description of a future event that turns out to be so close to perfect that it's just astonishing. Other times you get bits and pieces of the future.
We have dreams oftentimes that come true the next day. The book you mentioned, Experiment with Time,
yes,
is one of those that I just republished by J.W. Dunn, the English aeronautical engineer. And in Experiment with Time, he showed that night after night, he would write down his dreams, and they would occur the next day. So in his psychic world, his principal focus for experiencing his expanded awareness was to have a direct experience with what was going to happen the next day. And in this book, he wrote down a number of his dreams that were quite remarkable, tells people how to get in touch with their dream life, and then gives a theory for our consciousness having equal access to the future as it does to the present. And we've actually spoken for 20 minutes now without a disagreement, and I would have to say that the work at SRI, Stanford Research Institute, indicated pretty convincingly that it was no harder to look into the near future than it is to look into the present.
Oh, my. Hey, gentlemen, hold on. We're at a break point here. No harder to look into the future than it is the present or the past. Think about that. Good morning. We're talking about remote viewing. If you've never heard about it before, it's an eye-opener. I'm Art Bell. This is Coast to Coast AM. Stay right where you are. All right, gentlemen, you're back on the air again. We were talking about time, and time is one of my favorite subjects, and if this really traverses time, then I guess I'm trying to figure out what it says about everything that is, and that is exactly what it seems to address. Everything that is. It doesn't matter if it's a person, a thing. It doesn't matter where the place is. It doesn't matter whether it's on planet, off planet, or whether we're looking apparently in history or in the future. I mean, that's such an incredible concept to grasp that if it's true, it changes so much of what we thought we understood about physics. Or can we break it down to physics in the world as we understand it versus what's over on the other side? That's the only phrase I can use, over on the other side, where the laws of physics don't quite apply in the same way?
I completely agree with you, and it's that question that makes this the most exciting thing that a person can work on now, because it shows that we don't understand the basic ideas of causality. If we're able to sit in the laboratory or in the living room and describe what somebody's going to show us tomorrow where it's not yet chosen, it shows that our awareness has direct contact with something we're going to experience at a later time, even though it's not fixed.
Does anybody know offhand whether once you understand an event is going to occur, it could be changed? In other words, could you modify your or somebody else's behavior and change what otherwise will occur, or is it an inevitability?
Well, actually, probably it can be changed. In fact, there's an opportunity to explain a little bit more about the future issue that Russell raised. We actually pretty much agree on this. It is possible to remotely view the future, but there are certain restraints, just like there is in any kind of science. And Russell mentioned the immediate future, and of course that's a key. There's lots of evidence that indicates that the closer into the present you are, the more accurate you're going to be in remote viewing the future. And that makes sense if you think of the future not as being fixed yet, but as being like a braided rope of possible alternatives that spread out and increase in number the farther out you go.
Mm-hmm.
And so that indicates if there are alternate futures, that there isn't one set future. That means that if you perceive something that is going to happen in the future that you want to avert, that you can change that in some way.
So it's malleable. The whole timeline is malleable.
That seems to be the case. Now, that may not be true of the past, although there are people who think it might be. It seems to be much less so true of the past in any case. But the future,
I certainly don't think you can change the past, but all the modern data for spiritual healing indicates you can change the future. There's now many published scientific articles about research with people who are on a very bad trajectory from bad health to worse health, and a spiritual healer can intervene, seeing the situation psychically, reading the medical reports, and changing the outcome, putting the person on a different trajectory so that instead of following the world line that they appear to be on, which leads to illness and death, they take a different world line in which they recover.
If somebody were to find a way to manipulate an event in the past, we'd never know it, would we? In other words, I could pick anything. We've actually been investigating this in the program lately, thinking about it a little bit. That is to say, if something was changed in the past, it would change, the whole timeline would suddenly move and become parallel, and everybody simply would not remember what did happen. They'd remember what the history books now say happened from the point of manipulation on.
There's an old philosophy thought experiment in which they say, well, what would happen if every distance in the universe was doubled overnight while everybody was asleep? If you woke up in the morning, would you be able to tell? And of course, the philosophers have argued over that for years. The basic bottom line is no, you wouldn't be able to tell because there's no point of reference.
That's correct.
And same thing applies. And I think I see where you're getting at. Well, maybe the past is changeable, but we would never know if it was, because once it had been changed, that would become our past.
The reason I mention this to you both, and you might find it intriguing, is that I'll just pluck an example out of the air here. I had a lot of people who said, Art, I remember vaguely that Nelson Mandela died. He never got out of jail. He died in jail. He never went on to lead South Africa, be free, get free, and lead South Africa. And I had all of these people, after one call, all of these people said, I had the same exact memory. It's vague, but I remember that's the way it happened. And I'll bet you I had 200-300 emails from people who had a sort of a different, vague memory of something that was, only they know, of course, that today we know he was freed and did go on to lead South Africa, but they remember it a very different way. And just something to toss out in the air for you.
I can give you an example about affecting the future. We had a CIA contract monitor who had worked with us for many years, and in the course of his travels, he, of course, flew in airplanes all the time and was not afraid of flying, but one night, he had a horrifying dream in which he dreamt that he was in a terrible, fiery airplane crash that scared the hell out of him. And he was supposed to leave Detroit that day with his partner. Now, he was embarrassed to tell his partner that he had a scary dream and didn't want to fly, so he made an excuse that he had to stay in town, drove his partner to the airport, and then had the horrifying experience of seeing the plane crash. So we would say that this is a case where he was able to use precognitive information of a plane crash. In his dream, I would say that he dramatized it to put himself on the plane, which of course he was not. But he was able to use the information about actually seeing the crash to save his life. So it's an inspiration to us to be in touch with our dreams and in touch with these psychic experiences so that we can incorporate them into their lives.
You have to wonder, and of course you will never know, how many people have had some sort of impending psychic warning of their own demise and have shivered a couple of times and sort of shrugged it off and aren't around to tell the story now.
Yeah, I think remote viewers get more and more attuned to this kind of information and are very grateful to incorporate it into their lives.
Have the two of you done that?
Well, I had an experience that I wrote in Miracles of Mind. I write about an experience where I was riding my motorcycle on my way to work at Lockheed, and I began to worry as I was zipping along the parkway, what if there was a board in the road? Now, there was nothing to see. I just began to worry and went slower and slower, and as I swung around a corner, there in fact was a 2x4 lying directly across my path.
And had you hit that at full speed?
I would have probably crashed or been killed, but I was going slow enough because I had learned to pay attention to these psychic impressions so that I could just bump over the board and not be injured.
I find, in fact, that the sorts of things that Russell's describing do occur quite frequently to me. In fact, it's got to the point where I almost don't notice them. You know, you have a little intuition, you alter a certain activity, and you know, things happen differently, and you see how they could have happened the other way. In fact, I was trying to think of a specific experience, and I can't think of a specific one.
Well, I can sure give you one I had, and maybe you can tell me what I had. And maybe, for all I know, I described this to you before, because it's the only one that's ever happened to me in my life. But it's a beaut. I was working for a radio station in Santa Barbara, California, lived in a garden-type apartment, had my car parked outside in front of the apartment where I could, you know, through the sliding glass doors, I could open the curtain and I could see my car. But the curtains were closed, and I had come home after work, and I was sitting down and watching the evening news. Dan Rather, I believe, actually. And all of a sudden, this feeling came washing over me, and the only way I can describe it is almost like ocean waves washing over me, saying, your car's going to be hit. Something's going to hit your car. Your car's going to be hit. And I sat there and I thought, how stupid. This is really stupid. But, you know, I got up and I went across the room and I opened the curtains and I looked out at my car and it was fine. I thought, stupid. And I went back and sat down and watched the news some more. And almost within a minute, it came washing back over me again, just like tidal waves. It was impossible to ignore. Something's going to happen to your car. So I went, oh, God. I went back over and I opened the curtain and I slid the door open and I looked at my car. And my car was fine. And as I watched, here comes this fellow from the same apartment complex I was in, walking down the sidewalk, walked right down the sidewalk, got into the car in front of mine, started his car, put it in reverse, and slammed into my car. I sank to my knees. It freaked me out so badly, I sank to my knees, but I had enough presence of mind to get up and shout out, hey, I saw that. He said, I'm stopping, and the rest of the story isn't worth telling, but it was absolutely, I couldn't ignore it if I had tried. It's never been repeated. I couldn't bring it on if I wanted to. I couldn't have stopped it. It just happened.
Well, it's a wonderful example of how the future can affect the past. Your future experience of seeing the car crash caused you to have a car crash experience at an earlier time. Now, it didn't change the past, but it affected the past by giving you this precognitive experience.
You know, I, in fact, just finished writing a paper for one of my classes that uses this kind of information, but it actually has to do with some experiments that Dean Radin has done in what he calls presentiment studies, where they show people randomized set of photos, some of which have violent or disturbing content, and some of which are calm and peaceful. And they measure, or they monitor people for physiological reactions before they're shown the photos. And in fact, they've discovered a very statistically significant effect that people do react to disturbing photos before they're shown the photos, and they don't react in the same way before they see a calm one. So that's a laboratory instance of exactly what you've just described.
It's as though your body knows that it's going to be psychically assaulted, and a physiological monitor can show that your body has this precognitive information.
All right, here's a little problem I have with the ending of the remote viewing program. If remote viewing, in fact, actually worked, and I know I've asked you this before, and we had the couple program, and they ended the program and all the rest of it. I don't believe for one, the Cold War is officially over. Unofficially, it trudges on, without a doubt. In fact, many people say, and I think rightfully so, that we live in a more dangerous world today than we did during the worst part of the Cold War, or at least most of the Cold War, if not the worst part. A very dangerous world indeed. And so if remote viewing worked, it would be my view that there would be a program ongoing in our government right now.
I have an opinion about this, but I'd kind of like to hear what Russell's explanation.
I'd like to hear what you both have to say.
It's always possible that there's a black program, but people in the military are very worried about their careers, generally more worried about the careers than solving the problem. So that remote viewing and psychic phenomena, because it's not understood, is a source of embarrassment. Now, during the Cold War, where we could actually deliver tough answers to tough questions, people were willing to put their careers off to the side because we could actually solve their problems. Today, the problems don't seem as menacing, so people are more resistant or more reluctant to being teased and are willing to let the ESP go by the board. That's my opinion.
Okay.
And of course, there could be a black program that I don't know about.
Yeah, my version isn't too much different than Russell's, but, it's interesting. If you trace the history of the remote viewing program over the years, there were at least 5 times, maybe a few more, when it essentially was killed by the people who had control. They said, we don't like this is too weird, we don't want anything to do with it, and they canceled the program. And then someone else who was more forward-thinking kind of a person was in a position of responsibility, was able to revive the program, maybe under a different guise or whatever. What happened was, though, the program had friends and detractors. The problem is that all its friends either died or retired, and there was mostly only detractors left, and they're the ones that had the power, and so they canceled it. Now, you have to think what kind of people are in these decision-making positions in a government bureaucracy. They're the sorts of people who play the party line, who pay attention to politics. They tend to be quite left-brained, linear thinkers. They like closure. They like things pigeonholed in the places where they belong. I mean, they're just the opposite of the kind of people that are interested in a thing like remote viewing, which is open-ended and ill-defined in many cases, and nobody knows how it works, and that really bothers people.
Mm-hmm. Well, you might mention that listeners can meet these remote viewers and the military people at the forthcoming remote viewing conference. Can you tell them how they could find that conference?
Sure. It's, of course, I mentioned way early on it's in Las Vegas, but you can check out the website. It's listed on Art Bell's website, but I'll very briefly say what it is. It's rvconference.org. rvconference.org.
Yes, and as you mentioned, we've got a link.
Yep. And if I can, real quickly, give the toll-free number, too. That's, a lot of people don't have access to the web.
Sure.
That's toll-free 866-374-4782.
866-374-4782.
And a lot of your favorite psychic spies will be there to talk to you.
That's right.
Gentlemen, do you imagine or guess or know whether the Russians and or the Chinese have an ongoing program?
Well, I went to the Soviet Union twice during that period, and they certainly had an ongoing program. it appeared to me that they were not as successful as we were, for the interesting reason that it's harder to be psychic in a totalitarian country than it is to be in sunny California or Maryland.
Well, I don't recall the equivalent, the Ted Kopolinsky announcing the end of the Russian program.
They were doing remote viewing, but they were principally interested in remote behavior modification rather than inflowing information. They wanted to know, can we change the behavior of a person by watching a head of state on television and affecting his behavior, which is a activity Russians have been interested in since the 30s.
Oh, we call that remote influencing, don't we?
We certainly do.
And there's a lot of controversy about that. That's a big question, gentlemen. Is remote influencing, in your opinion, possible?
Oh, there's no doubt that there's a tremendous amount of published data on distant mental influence.
Oh?
And there's a continuum from distant mental influence. Well, it's a guy kind of thing. As you know, if you stare at the back of a girl's head in the movies, you can make her turn around. That has been instrumented so that if you put skin resistance measuring on a person and you can just stare at their video image,
yes,
during the times you stare at the image, they will be activated and their body will know that they're being stared at. That kind of distant mental influence has been very well replicated and published. And the continuance of that, of course, is distant healing, where you focus your healing intention on a distant person and can affect that person's capacity to heal themselves. And there is great medical interest and success in the distant mental influence as well as the distant healing.
All right, gentlemen, hold on. We'll pick up on remote influencing when we get back after the top of the hour. And I suppose if you can remotely heal, then you can probably remotely hurt. And I would think our military might be interested in that aspect of it. What do you think? Or when it comes to a head of state, just change his mind a little bit. Well, all right. Once again, Paul H. Smith and Russell Targ, don't forget they're going to be part of a remote viewing seminar, I guess it is, conference actually, in Las Vegas. And you can register for this now. And I would recommend the telephone way, probably, for the majority of you. It's a toll-free number. It's 866-374-4782. That's 866-374-4782. And I can imagine a lot of you would find application for your lives with something like this. Gentlemen, welcome back. We were talking about remote influencing, and most people who talk about this talk, as you did, about remote healing and the good side of it. But what I want to ask is, if it's possible to remotely heal, then why is it also equally possible to remotely hurt?
Since there is, this is Russ Targ,
yes.
Since there is a mind-to-mind connection, that is, if I visualize something, then you have a good chance of learning how to pick up what I'm visualizing. And therefore my thoughts could have an effect on your thoughts, and that's mental telepathy. So consequently, I would have the opportunity to confuse you by sending you a confusing signal. And in the World Chess Championship with Bobby Fischer, there was concern that Russian parapsychologists were sitting in the front row trying to confuse Bobby. Of course,
really?
It didn't work because he won anyway. But there was a Russian parapsychologist at the 1972 Chess Championship in Iceland.
Did we have anybody there?
I was there.
Oh, you were there.
But with regard to healing...
No, wait a minute.
Right.
We don't leave that for a second. Were you there doing any serious work?
Bobby Fischer is my brother-in-law. I was married to Bobby Fischer's sister.
So you were doing some serious work?
Well, I was there. We were all there cheering him on, trying to be helpful.
Trying to be helpful. All right, we'll leave it at that. You did say we had a lead over the Russians, right?
Yes.
That's incredible.
Yeah, Bobby demonstrated that even an American can become a world chess champion.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, all right. So, again, though, a direct answer to the question, if you can remotely heal, that is, to cause somebody's brain to begin healing their body, then the opposite should also be possible. Their brain can as equally make them sick, can it not?
Well, the evidence doesn't support that, I'm happy to tell you, Art. What happens is that a healer generally is able to affect the physiology of a distant person by becoming psychically in contact with that person and sending them love.
Right.
That is, they make a mind-to-mind connection and a commitment and outflow their intentionality or be a conduit for love to that person to allow one conjecture is to allow the person's immune system to begin to function. Healers in general are both not successful and are not willing to take part in distant killing or distant hurting. Many of them think that that's unethical, but by and large, a healer says, I heal by becoming one with that person, completing the matrix, sending a healing template to the person with whom I psychically merge. So the healing is through love. That's really inconsistent with hurting the person.
Well, I can assure you there are people who practice the craft, most of whom deny that any hurting is possible, but many of the very best don't. Many say, indeed, hurting is possible, can be done.
There's another thought here, though. It seems generally that in order for a distant or remote influence to work, you have to have the person that is your target's cooperation.
You've got to stay good and close to the phone for me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. You've got to have their cooperation.
You got to have their cooperation. If you think about it, we must have inbuilt defenses against this. I mean, think about, the last time you were driving through traffic and you accidentally cut somebody off and the guy was fuming, and you could tell he was really mad.
Yep.
If remote influencing was an easy thing to do, you'd probably be dead right then. So I think we have ingrained defenses against this that we probably built up over thousands of years, probably an evolutionary kind of a thing. And so when negative things would tend to be reflected by that, if a positive thing wouldn't be, because we would probably sense that there's positive intent and would cooperate in a sense with it.
Yes, but it is somewhat subjective. Let's leave the physical for a second and talk about remote influencing. It's somewhat subjective. From our point of view, a Russian leader doing some act or, a meeting with the Iraqis or, who knows, you could name it. From their point of view, would be a positive thing they're doing. From our point of view, it would not be at all a positive thing, perhaps for them to be doing. So if we had an opportunity to influence a Russian leader, from our point of view, that would certainly be a positive. Well,
the evidence is pretty good that you can activate him or change his physiology, but there is not evidence that you can change his behavior. In the healing experiments that have been done, they're really quite interesting, where, for example, at California Pacific Medical Center, where they had 60 AIDS patients who were really men who were very sick.
Right.
30 of them contributed they all contributed pictures. 30 lucky people were in the healing group, and their pictures were sent to healers around the country, who then prayed for them or did rituals. You had American Indian healers and Catholic prayer groups and all kinds of different healers.
Mm-hmm.
The 30 people in the 30 people who received the prayers had much better responses, fewer opportunistic illnesses, fewer trips to the hospital, fewer days in the hospital.
Was it a convincing percentage?
Was a very strong study. It was a highly significant study published in the Western Medical Journal last year. And there are now 2 other studies in Archives of Internal Medicine and in the Southern Medical Journal with heart patients. Again, highly statistically significant experiments. And I'm give my daughter Elizabeth Targ a plug. She's the psychiatrist who did the AIDS research It's a very strong result, highly significant, with only 30 people in each group. And this distant healing, although of course it's not understood, is becoming a subject of very great interest to the National Institutes of Health because it saves money.
My.
But
I had not heard of these studies. Then is there also evidence, gentlemen, that the work of one person praying or doing remote healing work or remote influencing, whatever words we want to attach to it here, is that amplified by 2 people, 10 people, 100 people, 1,000,000 people? If you have more minds at work, is it a stronger influence?
I think that the evidence shows that is the case. Beyond the healing effects, there are some interesting research also done by Dean Radin and by some other people that have replicated his studies on mass consciousness, which I think ties right in with what Russell was talking about. They would set up random number generators, which, of course, generate a series of random numbers. The idea is that some conscious influence can affect the randomicity of that generator, cause it to be less random, I guess.
Oh, yes. I know all about that. I have one of the early programs here on my computer, as you well know.
Well, and you've probably heard of this research where, they chose times when there was a great mass focus on a certain event. I mean, they used Super Bowls, they used Miss America pageants or Miss Universe, something like that. The O.J. Simpson verdict, different things like that, and they ran their generators at the time to see if focusing of all those people's attention on that particular event would affect the randomicity. And in fact, they produced some very strong effects from those, which, that substantiates somewhat what Russell's talking about in these other studies.
So then it might be possible not only to influence, for example, a person, or to heal a person, but to actually influence an event or an ongoing event, perhaps.
I think that's a conclusion you have to come to.
Well, it's believed that a group of people, if you've ever been in a room where a group of people are meditating, it's obviously, or it's the experience of meditators, that you can have a much more profound experience being with a group than by yourself, which is why people like to meditate in groups together. It's also conjectured that if you have a peaceful community with a lot of meditators, then that will create a more peaceful, larger community. And the transcendental meditation people say that they have evidence for that being true. I don't know that that's true, but they have a lot of papers indicating experiments where if you can get 1,000 or 2,000 people meditating in a community, the whole community, then there are less armed robberies, less violence in the community. As the community becomes coherent.
There's an interesting thought there. If you have a bunch of people thinking peaceful thoughts, the community becomes more peaceful.
Close to that phone, Paul.
Oh, sorry. Here we go again.
Yeah, you've really got to stay there, or you sort of fade away on us here.
Yeah, you get a new phone.
Your phone is actually a better phone, but you've just got to stay close to it.
All right. Well, if that effect can be, turn out to be true, and I've seen some objections to those studies, but nonetheless, there's still potential it could be. Then if there was a mass, thoughts about violence and that sort of thing, you'd think it would create just the opposite effect. If you think about modern culture and how violent movies have become, and and then you see the violence in American society, one wonders if maybe that opposite effect isn't occurring.
Would either one of you imagine that a mass concentration on affecting our weather or a specific weather event could be successful?
Wilhelm Reich believes that he had a way to do that. He had a cloud-busting apparatus that is widely written about. I don't know that that's true, but there is a lot of interest historically in being able to affect the weather. From the research, it appears much easier to affect the mind of another person. William Broad, who's in Palo Alto at the Mind Science Foundation, Broad's a distinguished scientist, showed that if he would meditate off to the side in another room, he could help a subject in the experiment quiet her mind more successfully than if he was just reading a magazine. And this was a well-replicated, published experiment that a experienced meditator, hidden from view, not known by the subject, can actually help somebody quiet their mind. And this is probably something that goes on in psychotherapy. There's a whole literature of these mind-to-mind experiments. I have a kind of hall of fame of successful experiment in miracles of mind.
Mm-hmm.
In the book we published about spiritual healing and psychic spying, we give the data for these mind-to-mind experiments. The evidence is really quite strong that the thoughts of one person can have a calming or healing effect on the mind of another person.
So we can measure scientifically and quantify the effect, but we still have no idea, really, do we, scientifically, that is, of the method. We can measure the effect, but we don't know the method. There's no frequency that we can really tune into. There's no scientific instrument that we can use to measure electromagnetic energy that may be emitted, or any other frequency or scientific way of determining the method through which this is occurring.
No, we'd say it's not electromagnetic energy. Physicists who think about this often go back to the idea that we're in fact not separate from one another in consciousness, that we live in a non-local world, that because distance doesn't matter, that is, Paul and I have done remote viewing across the room and across the world with equal efficacy. So this does not look like an energetic ability. That is, it does not look like energy transfer, electromagnetic waves are involved. What it looks more like is that, again, what the Buddhists would say is that in consciousness, there is only one of us here. And we all reside in bodies. I have a body and you have a body, and that makes us feel that we're separate. But in consciousness, there is an aspect of us that's not separate. And it's this coherence, this non-local connection. Although it sounds like metaphysics, it's the physical description that is the very best fit for the data we have.
Well, it is metaphysics to the degree that we can't quantify it, we can't prove it, right? So we're imagining this to be so. Modern theoretical physicists are talking about as many as 10 or 11 different dimensions.
The dimensions they talk about are dimensions used to explain string theory.
Yes.
And what we think of as curled up dimensions.
Yes.
The description for how psychic ability might work involves a expansion of our ordinary understanding of the force space that we live in, so that our consciousness actually has an ability to expand. So that what you discover is that we actually are expanded awareness. That is, who we are is not what it says on our business card necessarily, but we have the opportunity to reside in a state of expanded awareness. And frequently the payoff, the remote viewing has a lot of interesting things you can do with it. You can find your car keys or a parking space.
Yes.
Or you can find what stock to buy. You can also find a way to stop your mental chatter to reside in the loving space that the mystics have talked about.
How are the two of you doing in the market?
Well, actually, I'm engaged in a preliminary, the assessment evaluation part of an experiment in stock picking using what we call associative remote viewing. Although we haven't put money on a stock yet, partly because it's been a down market, I've hit 80% essentially, 8 out of 10 tries. I've made the correct prediction, yeah.
Oh, gee, I bet the brokerage houses just would love you.
Well, yeah, if the trick is, of course, to pick a stock that's going to go the way you want it to, and then predict the correct direction.
Right.
If you pick a stock that you end up predicting is going down, you can't buy it anyway, so...
No, but actually,
you don't lose money.
You really can make money either way, whether the market's going down or up doesn't matter, as long as you know what to pick.
That's true. You can sell short if you've got the guts.
Sure.
What Paul's describing we call associative remote viewing, and we made quite a lot of money buying and selling silver, and in fact, we made most of our money selling silver into a falling market.
Oh, really? You see, this is exactly the sort of thing that people always screech in the background. Oh, come on. If this stuff works, they'd be making money doing it.
In fact, our publisher said if my colleague Jane Catherine and I wrote this book claiming to tell people how to do remote viewing, the publisher, New World Library, said if you guys are actually going to do it, tell people you should do it yourselves. And we did a series of formal studies forecasting silver just a couple of years ago when it was not very dynamic.
Right.
And just two mild-mannered scientists were able to get 11 out of 12 hits successfully. So the secret is that this is very easy to do.
But there's a little more to it, which goes beyond just the remote viewing aspect. You have to know how to pick the stocks, how to pick the targets for the ARV. And
so you use absolute standard remote viewing techniques to do it, right?
Yes.
All right. When we get back, we're at the bottom of the hour now. Anybody can do it, huh? All right. Well, that should be intriguing a few of you out there. Yeah, that's what everybody's always screeching. Oh, come on. If they could really do that, they'd be millionaires. They'd be making a lot of money. Well, they have been making money. That's interesting. When we come back, we'll find out what it takes for all of you to do what they're doing. We'll be right back. With that crack back into the world of remote viewing and influencing, gentlemen, you're back on the air again. One obvious question is with practical application like the kind we just talked about. A lot of people are going to be very interested in how they can do it or how far they've got to go to be able to get proficient in a remote viewing. And obviously the conference would be a very good step for anybody who can get to Las Vegas. And we'll give out the number for that again. But people have varying degrees of intuition. Some people listen to it. Some people block it out. But it's really, to some degree or another, in everybody. And is that where it begins?
We think everybody has psychic ability. But there are some people who are more talented than others. ESP is like a musical ability, as everybody can learn to play the piano a little bit, and with a few months' practice, you can surprise yourself at how far you can go.
Right.
Doesn't mean that you're going to become Arthur Rubinstein or Horowitz, but you can combine practice with the talent you have to do surprisingly better than you're doing at the present time. So one of the most surprising things that came out of the remote viewing program at Stanford Research Institute is that almost everybody who came through the program, whether it was government scientists, cabinet officials, or Army recruits, people were able to get in touch with their part of themselves that's psychic and learn to incorporate that psychic ability into their lives. Now, some of these people were great psychics, like Joe McMoneagle, who is a practitioner today, probably the most capable remote viewer in America, Pat Price, Ingo Swann, and other very, very capable remote viewers. And then there were the rest of us who did moderately well and could contribute to the program as best we could.
Mm-hmm. You know, there's actually two parts to the thing to keep in mind. First of all, as Russell says, everybody seems to be psychic, but the talent may come in not in so much of the, quote, psychic ability, but in being open to accessing that. Personality may play a role. The idea, of course, is it involves the human perceptual system, and some people are more perceptive than others.
Mm-hmm.
The psychic ability may be uniform amongst everybody, but different people are better at accessing it than others.
Well, I'm sure that's true. Does that mean that the naturals are the ones who get to be the professionals ultimately, if they strive to do so, Or does it mean that somebody who is not particularly intuitive to begin with can eventually get to the same level if they work hard enough, if they devote themselves to it?
I've actually found that people who, the so-called natural ones, or at least people who consider themselves to be naturals, oftentimes have a harder time. It's because they have preconceived notions about how to go about it, and they have a hard time getting rid of those preconceived notions. A person who doesn't consider themselves psychic or has had no experience in the past oftentimes has nothing to unlearn, and therefore they oftentimes do better.
So, if the military program was still going on today, and the two of you had to choose new recruits, from which field would you choose?
I would choose people who were successful at doing whatever kind of outrageous thing they presently did to make a living. If I live here in Silicon Valley in California, I would probably choose whoever was running a successful startup who could deal with all the uncertainties and imponderables in his business. And I would choose that outgoing, intelligent, adventurous, successful person rather than the young psychic woman who feels she is nothing if not psychic.
I'm with you all the way. In other words, those who have not only talked the talk, but they've walked the walk on their own. In other words, they're already CEOs, or they've already accomplished greatly in whatever field they've chosen, and it would be your obvious conclusion they've done so either consciously or unconsciously with the use of intuitive ability.
That's right. I taught people how to do remote viewing. In fact, I supported our program at SRI by showing higher and higher government level people how to do remote viewing so they would have their own experience to deal with rather than our story about weird stuff that happened in California. And we did that right up to the level of the Undersecretary of Defense, where we showed him how to describe his mental pictures with regard to where his buddy was hiding.
Which Undersecretary of Defense was that? That sounds interesting.
Yeah, I thought so too.
I think we'll let him pass at the moment.
How much of the work that you did for the military, and for that matter, what you've learned and or used since, are you unable to talk about tonight? Is there any small percentage of things that you still can't or won't talk about? So that's a way of asking without asking specifics.
Well, most of the material was not declassified. So that's a way to answer your question.
Really?
There's a certain amount of operational things that
well, now, gee, wait a minute. They closed down the program, said it didn't work, so why would they keep the stamp O classification on it?
You certainly might ask. That would be a very fair question. But before I would... In Miracles of Mind, we described the whole ins and outs of the CIA program, and I got the material released to me under Freedom of Information, still with secret stamps on it. But before I would publish that, I wanted a letter from CIA saying, you can publish this stuff. And in fact, I published a letter from the CIA to me, along with the documents, so that people don't even think about sending me to prison.
So the CIA said, go ahead?
That I asked for certain things that I want, certain stellar things, principally that I did with Ingo Swann and Pat Price.
Right.
That I wanted to publish. And with the help of 2 senators, a congressman, and 2 lawyers in 18 months and quite a bit of money,
wow,
I got the material released to me under Freedom of Information.
Okay. How much material, percentage-wise, remains unreleased?
98%.
Oh, my God, really?
Well, it's interesting. In fact, there was a report on NPR a while back. Well, let's start out. When the CIA declassified the existence of the program, they said, within 6 months we'll have declassified all the archives and they'll be available to the public. 6 months, actually probably a year later, it still wasn't there, so they said, by 1998 we'll have declassified it and made it available to the public. Well, it's still not available.
See, now, that's why I'm suspicious that there's still something going on.
Well, there are two things to think about. One thing is that many of the operations that we ran involve what they call other sources and methods. We're dealing in projects that if what the project was or the content of the project was known, it would reveal something about other intelligence collection capabilities we have. And so those still have to be protected. So they
human assets, satellites,
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to be careful how they release that kind of information. The other problem is, now I'm making some excuses to the CIA, even though I'm mad at them. The other problem is that during the Clinton years, there was a huge effort to declassify government projects.
Yes.
And there was just this huge glut, and the CIA was bringing in people from retirement. They were hiring subcontractors, trying to keep up with this. And even in the normal due course of declassification brought about by the executive order, Congress would jump in, and congressmen would insist that the CIA move their pet project to the top of the line and bump everything back. So there are some bureaucratic reasons why this stuff may not be out in public yet. But nonetheless, there's enough public interest in it, you'd think that they'd have made more headway.
You would think so. You said you were angry with the CIA. Why would that be?
Just for that reason, because they haven't published the stuff. In fact, the NPR report said that they had 100,000 pages declassified sitting in boxes in the hallway at Langley, waiting to be sent to the archives. And in fact, the archives still haven't received those boxes, and that's been at least a year ago.
At least. Now, why shouldn't that at least raise some flags for you with regard to whether there's an ongoing program?
Well,
or does it?
I always tell people that there's a 10% chance that they may still be doing it, and it's way down deep, buried in some vault in Virginia. I say 10% because, as I explained before, I think the bureaucracy probably gives a 90% chance that it really is dead. So, the fact that they haven't passed along, well, maybe they are trying to protect the notion. But the fact is, so much is known about remote viewing now, so much is out there in the public that the records that they've got that they could declassify that aren't sensitive for other reasons they're not going to add that much more to the picture, so I don't see any real reason to keep them embargoed like that.
Well, yes, but your point is what makes me suspicious, and that is that there is so much now known, a lot of what you've talked about tonight, that in my mind, if we're not using it and others are, what kind of national security do we have?
Well, we have a political one. And this stuff is potentially embarrassing. Thomas Kuhn, who introduced the notion of the paradigm into the public vernacular, he said that basically the old guard has got to be defeated or driven out before the new paradigm can come in. And in fact, that's kind of what's happening. We still have the old guard running the show right now, and somebody said it's attributed to Einstein. He said that science progresses one death at a time.
One death at a time.
And that may be what has to happen before it becomes more acceptable.
I would also say that we're making progress with regard to constructing physics models, so this becomes less crazy sounding, so that as physics is our best friend in this regard. As physics is moving along in the area of non-locality, so that there are things in physics that seem just as crazy as the things we talk about in ESP, except when you do the experiments in the physics laboratory, you're using electrons or photons. John Clauser, who was the physicist who did the very first experiments in non-locality, at a recent lecture said, it looks like it's not possible to keep anything in a box anymore, because they're doing these experiments not only showing that the photons notice one another kilometers apart, but even big things like buckyballs, which are made up of a soccer ball-sized thing made up of 60 carbon atoms, and you can do quantum experiments with enormous 60 times 120 atomic mass unit particles, which is like a million times bigger than a photon, and they still interfere with each other.
you were asking a question a while back about essentially what, we don't know the cause, what the causal linkages are between these things that make things like remote viewing work.
Right.
We're trying to get at that. And Russell, of course, keeps referring to non-locality, which is a very interesting quantum physics effect. The problem with using non-locality as an explanation, particularly for scientists, is they don't know what makes non-locality work.
Right, exactly right.
It's an effect that happens between two physical objects at the quantum level, and how that effect actually occurs, they know it does, they just don't know how it occurs. They don't have a clue.
Maybe we need some quantum computers.
Well, it may lead to quantum computers, but I don't know if they'll answer the question.
So it may be then, Russell, that physics can begin to answer how this is happening eventually.
I think that's what's happening. I could send you a paper. I've written a paper with a physics professor from Berkeley describing the complex space-time in which we live. Elizabeth Rauscher, the relativity theorist, and I have worked a number of years creating a very simple extension of the four-dimensional space that we live in, showing that each dimension has a real and imaginary part.
Let me interrupt real quick, Russell. Elizabeth actually is going to present this paper at the conference. So if people are interested in this subject, another plug for the conference. Come and attend. Go ahead, Russell.
The way to describe it is that in the complex space-time, there is always a path of zero distance connecting any 2 points. So if I'm sitting here in California and you're going to be doing something tomorrow morning, there's a path that comes from midnight in California to 8 o'clock in Arizona, and that path for consciousness has no distance at all. So I could send, this paper is going to be published in a couple of months, and I could put it on your website if that would be interesting.
That would be interesting, yes.
So we think that there is we call it an 8-space model. It's not that we're creating a bunch of new dimensions, is that we notice that each of the familiar 4-space dimensions has a real part and an imaginary part that allows your consciousness and elementary particles to move through the complex dimensions with no distance at all. And it's another way of saying that we are in fact connected to each other through space and time, which is what the mystics have said for millennia.
If a person with average-only abilities, we'll just use that for the sake of conversation, were to approach somebody at your level and say, I want to develop my ability, how much work and how much time would they have to put in before they began to effectively become proficient enough to further their own lives?
Paul and I can show people in a day how to do remote viewing that will blow their socks off.
Really?
Yep.
In a day?
Yep. Because it's an ability you already have. That we don't make you more psychic. What we do is show you how to stop the ongoing mental chatter. An engineer would say, we improve the signal-to-noise ratio by stopping the noise.
Yes. But then you have to learn how to interpret the signal you're getting as well.
Yeah, you certainly have to do that. But by showing people tricks to separate out the psychic signal from the mental noise, people can learn to do this surprisingly well. That I spent a decade sitting in the dark, paid for by the CIA, telling people, don't name the target, just tell me what you're experiencing. What is the form? What is the shape? How do you feel about it? What's the color? Stop guessing. And to the extent that I could get a person to tell me about their experiences and not about what they think it is, that's the extent to which the person can do very well. So the surprise is, the secret is, that there really isn't any secret.
Yeah. If a massive number of people began to do this worldwide, how would it change the world?
One way it would change the world is that people would quit lying to each other. Would that be a good idea?
I don't know. I've often wondered about that. They've actually done studies of what kind of world it would be like if everybody had to tell everybody the precise truth. And, of course, we every day make up nice little white lies and things to make people feel better, not to hurt feelings, and all sorts of things, right?
The more important aspect is that they would learn to get in touch with the quiet part of themselves so they could reside in the loving experience that's available. That the mystics weren't interested in finding parking places. That what the mystics were interested in is that if you stop the mental chatter, you have the opportunity to reside in a loving space that's not judgmental, that's not fearful, so you wake up in love instead of what you presently wake up in.
But that's about 10 million miles from modern America.
It's a reward for finding a way to stop the chatter.
Oh, indeed. But as I just said, it's about 10 million miles away from modern America. Today, we worry about parking spots. We worry about raises. We worry about promotions. We worry about, I don't know, the everyday things that people who are trying to advance themselves are concerned with. And there are applications for all of that, aren't there?
There certainly are. Carl Sagan spent a lifetime looking for God, and he just decided in the end of his life that the idea is incomprehensible. So you could say, why couldn't a smart guy like Carl Sagan find God if the whole rest of the world is able to experience it? And the answer is, Carl Sagan could never stop talking.
And he tends to look in the wrong place, too.
Well, at least he's,
now he knows.
Yeah, that's how to put it. Now he knows. Hold on, gentlemen. We're at the top of the hour. Paul H. Smith and Russell Targ are my guests. We'll be back.